We are live. What is happening, everybody? Hope everybody's having a fantastic Saturday, I think is the day. Anyway, so a couple of things that are going on just in the land of, your old buddy Brian over here. I will be trying to get my HP tuners back up and running so I can data log this thing. Basically, with the new beta version, I downloaded it, it got all pissed off, and now I've got to wipe that thing completely clear of any of my parameter identifications, go back, reload everything, and hopefully I get it right. Now this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit different. I'm going to map it out first and then go in there and actually just get my PIDs set, but hopefully it'll take, because you talk about driving you nuts. When you go to the drag strip, you're trying to get like solid data. What's it acting like in really crappy conditions? What's it acting like in great conditions? You've got to have all of those data sets. Without it, you don't really know that your tune is doing what you want it to do. And without the data logs, you don't know where your shift points are, fuel trims, how far you're getting into cat over temp, timing values, all of that. You've got to know that, and without it, it is just mind-numbingly frustrating. So I got to circle the wagons, get all of that information back, basically stripped, and then back into the PIDs, and hopefully it'll work. Let's say what's up to everybody real quick. TU is in first. What is up, my man? How's it going? Got the fist pump. Michael Corleone, good evening, Fresh Mason. Got the arm flex. I like it. Sinister Red Eye checking in. Good evening, Mr. Mason. Happy Saturday. Flex to you, my friend. And Ruben's checking in saying, hey, what's happening? B Mac, what is up, man? Thumbs up, arm flexes. And the bald guy with the shades on, my favorite one. So, basically, this is kind of talking about some goofy, funky stuff that goes on with tuning, right? So, little things that can just freaking go wrong that'll make your, like, normal, happy, everything is sunshine and freaking rainbows, and turn that into freaking thunderclouds and an ass whip. And so this is one of them, though, and it's one of these types of things where you just can't really get upset about it. You have to know that it's just part of whenever you're working on stuff like this, stuff that goes wrong. So again, just talking about HP tuners, just a glitch, got a little funky, and that's one of the things I've got to do to fix it so that I can get the car back to the drag strip and hopefully get some nasty weather bad DA data logs. You might be going, well, what is the point of that? Why am I going to do that? The reason for that is I've got to know, if I run this car in the heat, how long is it going to take the car to basically go into a hot spark table? I want to make sure that I'm commanding full timing, basically. I want to see what the fuel trims are looking like. Shift points. I want to make sure the shift points are remaining consistent. All of that is such critical information when you're really, if you're driving for that nth degree of perfection, which some of us kind of get wrapped up in. Working with the car that I've got, trying to just get the most out of it and of course making sure it's safe too. I mean, I'm really honing in on that knock retard number, because this is another thing. Looking at fuel quality issues as well. How does the summer blend work compared to winter blend data logs? Am I seeing higher knock sensor voltage? Am I seeing, what am I seeing? What's going on here? These are all things that with proper data logging, you can basically flush out, information you can flush out. It'll give you an idea as far as, okay, well, maybe for this tune to be an all-weather tune, I need to throw a little bit more fuel at it. Or it looks like I'm getting false knock with this summer blend. Looks like this fuel quality kind of sucks. So, or it's real knock for that matter. So anyway, that's the kind of stuff I'm belly aching over here. Hey, Nathan's checking in saying, just bought a 2020 Scat. Hey, congratulations, man. It's a fun car. Thanks for all the great info. Thank you very much for hanging out with us. Appreciate it. Ruben's checking in also saying, BMAC purchased an F1 inner chiller and blower spacers and thermal blanket. Thoughts? I'm going to be going to do some pole dancing to get that money back. Yeah, you and me both, man. Among other things. So, what's it like around the ranch? Well, had to convert my house, which is an older house, from 3-phase to single phase, which also included having to get a new outside unit because my outside AC unit was a 3-phase and not a single phase. Yeah, could have bought a nice truck for what I spent on that. Myself and the little lady. So yeah, we'll be recovering from that for a while. So I know the feeling, believe me. But anyway, you're asking about the inner chiller and blower spacers and thermal blanket. That's awesome that you're going that route. Here's the thing. How well does it work? Well, I'll tell you this. I haven't seen big gains at the drag strip with the spacers and the blanket. However, obviously the inner chiller or killer chiller, whichever way you decided to go, I have seen good things with that, especially when you're capturing some consistency, keeping those temperatures down for your intercooler. Big difference, especially when the weather gets hot. You get those temperatures down to around 60 degrees and lower. Really, actually, if you can maintain them under about 70 degrees and lower, the car will pick up power. Now, the blanket and the spacers, mixed reviews on that, but they work the best in the heat. So during colder months, not so much, but during the summer months, you will see a bit of a gain there. So you've got everything basically that you needed in one shot, which was very smart, by the way. You got your spacers, you got your blanket, and you got your chiller. Those all three working together will actually get you some gains. Could see as much as a full tenth, and it doesn't sound like much, but a full tenth is about a car length and change at the speed these cars are going. Could even see more than that, provided that you are consistently keeping those temperatures down, and if the temperature is hotter, you'll see a greater gain. So that's what I've seen at the drag strip, and I'm pretty sure that's what you're going to see with your car too. So congratulations on that. That is a good purchase on you there, buddy. TU saying, B, this may be out of nowhere, but man, lately I've been thinking I want you to get a stick car manual, take it to the track, and do a serious video on tutorials on how to cut quick ETs in a manual. I am not too far behind you on that one. As a matter of fact, I'm working on something. I'm just now kind of working on something that's along those lines. It might be a little ways off, but it's gonna be it may be a bit of a reflection to my old school roots. I'm gonna try to talk my dad out of the black car, out of the '89 GT. It's 351 car, but it does need a different transmission. It needs a G-force transmission or an Astro 5-speed, either way. But it's basically just that away from being probably an all-purpose, best of all worlds scenario. But here's the thing. I used to bracket race that car, and a lot of it has to do with tire setup. Believe it or not, the easiest way to drive a manual is to learn how to play with it. That's the big thing. Get the thing out, do some dumb stuff with it, play with it, but practice is the big part. Practice, practice, practice. And I used to practice launching that car and the Vipers on the street. I would practice, usually it could be like a Tuesday at 3 o'clock in the morning. I had some pretty killer spots that I would run to. Saturday nights, I had some really killer spots that I would go sneak out to. If I wasn't actually, street racing the thing. But if I was out for specific just practice runs, I would practice until I got sick of driving the car. And really that's how I ended up getting good at it. But the thing is you got to stay on top of it. And I haven't been staying on top of it, but it was the same way with the Vette. It was the same way with the Vipers, same way with the Mustangs. Practice, 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 practice. Get out there, play with it, have fun. But the big part of it is really in the tire. You've got to have, depending on how you're going to launch it, if you're just going for a number and you're going to twilight the thing, sidestep the clutch and just drag a front tire on your way to pick a number, that's one thing. But launching the car on a drag radial is something else. And with my coupe, that was the big thing, is that I practiced. This is when I lived in Northern California. I didn't really ever get a chance to take the car to the drag strip there. I was taking it to the drag strip a lot when I was in Dallas. But when I was living in NorCal, I just run the thing all over the place on drag radials, and I would just practice launching it over and over and over and over again, to the point that it's it's kind of funny. There's so many similarities with just driving the car normally and launching it that, you know, just the way that you roll out of the clutch, roll into the throttle, it's very similar to just taking off from a stop sign. But obviously you're feeding in power and you're releasing the clutch at this certain rate. It's a certain feel that you're feeling. And really it has more to do with the clutch disengagement, or rather clutch engagement, than it does with throttle application. But anyway, I'm working on it, actually. Me is saying I have a 29. I have a where'd it go? Oh, me just retracted it. Okay, T is saying, right on, B, that's going to be legit as hell. Man, I'm working on it. Like I say, it would be a lot of fun. It's going to have to get kind of mixed in with the Camaro in the truck right now in terms of projects. I just got through doing cab mounts on the truck. No real good way to get video on that because it's cab mounts on a truck. I mean, it basically kind of does itself. But had to grind some welds down in the cab on the bolts and just, anyway. Camaro's up next for the dash. And then from there, I may start looking at sliding back into a little bit more old school stuff. It's fun. Don't get me wrong. It's fun with the Mopar stuff. But the problem is that it kind of takes you out of the like, you always hear me talking about fun, right? It takes you out of that fun zone and that cool zone when it's, I hate to say it like this, but when it's as easy as it is with one of these Hellcats, it's a lot more fun to kind of go back to your roots and just try to validate, was I really that good, or is my memory just propping me up a little bit? No, I miss it. I have a lot of fun, a lot of great memories. I had a lot of fun with that too. So, Makey, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. Man, I don't know what to say. Thank you so much. He's asking, in my opinion, what is the best mods that won't void your warranty? All right, now to answer the question, I need a little bit of room with this because you got to be careful with the phrase "won't void your warranty." So let's kind of slide into this a little bit. First is going to be, well, tires, okay, traction modifications. As long as we're talking about the stock size, you should be good. So let's say you've got, well, a Hellcat, just because it's the first thing that popped into my head, or a Scat Pack or any of them. As long as you run a stock size drag radial, you'll be fine. If you go larger, though, sometimes you can get hassled. It's weird, I know, but I've heard of that. But that's only if that tire affected the breakage of whatever you're talking about. Chances are it won't have. Second thing that I really like that won't void your warranty, or at least that's easy to, it's easy to remove, in other words, is going to be a pedal commander. Now I know I'm going to catch flack from all you hardcore tuner enthusiasts out there. Look, I can walk you through HP tuners and put a tune together just fine. But I'll tell you something. There's something to be said for something that's as cool as just a pedal commander. You can chill the car out if you just are cruising. You're not really trying to get live with it. It's just you're kind of chilling with it. That's where that eco mode can come into play, especially when you're on long trips. I used to use pedal commanders on my E63, my buddy's 550 turbo. It's just the Range Rover. We use them on higher end cars too, and they're a lot of fun. And if you are feeling aggressive, you can throw that thing and just ramp up the gain a little bit to where, like from y'all's point of view, instead of the throttle being linear like this, it's actually kind of curved up, so that underfoot the same amount of throttle just means more throttle blade opening, so it makes the car feel a little bit livelier, a little bit peppier. That's really cool because in a lot of ways, that's what you're looking for in a tune, is throttle response, a little bit more of a personalized driving experience, something a little bit different from the norm. And that's exactly what you get with that. Other things that I like, Hellcat, if you got a Challenger or even a Charger, it's just a bit more of a challenge to put in. But Hellcat airbox, Hellcat snorkel, Hellcat filter. Those are things that you'd have to really go looking for something like that to avoid a warranty, but easily swapped out if you were really concerned with it. Decent enough gains, you know, about a tenth-ish at the drag strip. But overall, it's a factory part and it works really well. Now, aside from that, if you've got a Challenger, Mopar rear seat delete, because you lose about 45 pounds, and it makes the car actually a little bit more functional. Even though you lose 2 seats, you're losing 2 seats that are fold down, but they don't even fold down from the factory design flaw, big time. Lightweight battery. So again, we're talking about battery, we're talking about weight savings here. And with weight savings, it's free horsepower. When you do a rear seat delete, like I've got the Mopar rear seat delete, same one that you would find in a Red Eye, or more familiar to most would be the Demon rear seat delete, same thing. But you've got that as an option, as well as lightweight battery. That's 60, 70, basically 70 pounds that you're saving there. And you're picking up some capacity with that battery. Doesn't sound like a lot of weight, but in this case, 70 pounds is a lot of weight. So those are the things that I like. And aside from that, you know, diff brace, not so much. Rear trailing arms, yeah, maybe. But those could potentially void a warranty, and they're not as easily removed unless you get like the TVA machine rear diff brace, or you know, just the rear trailing arms are pretty easy to swap out. So, but that's my list of stuff. And to be honest with you guys, I mean, a tune, it's kind of cool. They do pick up power. Most of your performance gains are going to be in the trans tune anyway. Hand to God, I mean, we've already figured that out with the Hellcat. I'd proven it with Shalandra too. So, I mean, that's just kind of where it's at. Those do void the warranty though, so steer clear of that. And of course, exhaust modifications, you can remove the mid mufflers, and I don't think that's going to void any warranties or anything like that, if that's something that you want to do. In other words, just to make it loud. But removing the caps or anything like that, pretty much off the table, because it doesn't really make a difference. They don't pick up anything. In fact, when I did all the dyno testing on catalytic converter removal, the car picked up a little bit of torque, and that was it. I mean, you would only notice it on the dyno, and you would only notice it in such a specific area that you would have to be freaking Sherlock Holmes to find the gains. So basically, it's kind of the general keep it simple type of a thing. There's the only other thing you could sneak in there probably without getting caught would be a fast man throttle body, maybe a ported intake manifold also. But we're starting to kind of get into we're getting into the kind of the nitpick of the thing, where it's just really, you're not going to find them talking about these modifications, but they're also not going to throw a lot of power your way either. So, you know, think of those things as, you know, the final pieces to the puzzle. But if you're going without a tune and every mod helps just a little bit, then sure, Fastman true ported throttle body, ported intake manifold, Hellcat airbox and filter, rear seat delete, lightweight battery, and that can actually add up for you. So anyway, I hope that helps you out. Thank you for supporting the channel, man. I appreciate that. Let's see. Sinister is saying, I know you run the Tri-5. What are your thoughts on the Mickey Thompson RT Street SSs between the two? Car is not a daily and will not be in the rain. I like them. ET Street SSs are good. I'll tell you a tire, though, that's getting a lot of love right now, and that's the Tri-5 G2. The Hellcat guys are starting to fall in love with those tires. I don't have any reports of them in the rain. I've got a lot of experience with Tri-5s in the rain and a little bit of experience with the SS in the rain. The SS in the rain, not so great. But just, you know, FYI, you're not going to have your car in the rain. So just, but word to the wise. The SS is okay. It'll hook a little bit better than the regular Tri-5R. But again, I mean, depending on your power level, you're going to really have to go hunting to find a big difference between the two in terms of just outright traction. I've actually found, depending on where I am, the SS to not be quite as good as the Tri-5 in one weird area. Just So if you're in a dusty area, if they're doing a lot of construction around you, or something like that, the compound is soft enough on the SS to where it seems to pick up a lot of that dust, and it just kind of sticks to the tire. The tire gets hot just from driving it around, and but that tire is softer, and anyway, that dust was causing me some problems, but I can only attribute that to the fact of where I was driving the car, and trying to get some testing and things like that. By the time I got the Tri-5s on the car, the area, it was, again, it's just light dusting on the street. It was just sand more than anything else, just a little bit. But that had all kind of blown off and blown out by the time I got the Tri-5s and went out to do more testing and didn't have any problems. But just something weird that I noticed with those tires, they just would pick up on, just stuff in the road. But the G2, man, don't sleep on it. So far, from what I'm hearing, some of the, single pulley Hellcat guys, the guys running, 10.0s, 990, 980 range in crazy good weather, basically like a 1020 car right now, from a roll where it would normally haze Tri-5s, the Tri-5R just haze them a little bit, they are dead hooking on the street. Like, dead hooking on the street. So I don't have a clue what they're going to act like as far as longevity. I don't know if they're going to be anywhere near as good as the Tri-5R, but looks like they're kind of outgunning that SS. So just keep an eye out for those things. John Venus checking in saying, "Good evening, B. Mason. Great to see you back. God bless. God bless to you. Thank you very much. Appreciate the kind words." Lon saying, "You can't be afraid of burning the clutch." The thing is that you've got to use the clutch. The guys get worried because they think they're going to glaze the clutch. If you're doing it right, you're not. And in fact, there's about a 3/4 of a second max that I would like to keep on the engagement of the clutch. So it's 1 thou, and I'm pretty much at wide open throttle at that. So if you can imagine throttle and clutch, I know it's backwards for you guys, but I can't swap them. Well, sort of. Anyway, it's basically tack it up, hold it at about 4 grand, and basically it's tack, hold, and then I'll just have the clutch out a little bit, or just right off the floor, not engaged, but just basically underfoot. I'm not pressing it down. I'm actually just kind of letting it out a little bit. It's tough to do, by the way, because you can start to get a little bit of creep. That's why sometimes you'll see guys just holding a brake and they'll have their foot just barely riding off that clutch. But that's kind of a cheat. But you'll have your foot on the throttle, foot on the clutch, just barely off the floor, and it's holding, and you're gonna 1,000. And it's just as you would say one, like the one part of it. That's when I'm out into the floor and I'm ready to grab second gear. So it should be 1,000, and then I'm going to grab second, and that's going to be all she wrote. And then, there's going to be people crying, staring at my back. Anyway, let's see. And again, Mankey, thank you very much for the contribution, man. I appreciate it. Hopefully that I was able to help you with some things. Some Ferrari guy saying, "Did you see the C8 with just drag radials run a 1095, not even front skinnies?" Well, Amelia Earhart's car went 1070s with a 100 shot, no tune. So there's that. But yeah, I mean, the car runs good. It's light. It's got a good power plant, great power train. It's just my only beef with that car is this. It's the cost of the thing. And I hate bringing up money because, look, everybody's situation is different. And what I say is expensive, somebody just might go, I mean, no, you know what I mean? So I get it. It's all relative. But the problem with the Vet, even if it did run a 1095 in the heat on just a rear, that's fantastic. And I'm not going to discount that. But for the money, you look at it and you go, well, shit, I mean, you've got most of them costing 80 something grand, right? 90 grand. You're not going to find that the poverty Vet out there at 64 or whatever it is. You have to order it like that. Like, you have to go way out of your way, apparently, to order that entry-level Corvette, and they're just not going to be on anybody's lots. and this is assuming that we're past COVID and all this other stuff and the factory's just kind of churning them out like normal. But when you look at the dollars and cents on this thing, and then you start to go, well, damn it, what did the GT500 do? Well, the GT500 is already proven to go quicker, and by rights at least, it's less expensive, provided you don't get nailed with that ad attack. So, like the Vette, I like where they're going with it. To me, the Vette makes more sense. It's starting to make more sense, I should say. But I don't know. Until I get a chance to see one in action, aside from, outside of just a private track rental, and until I get to see one really take center stage with mods, it's going to be hard for me to want to get behind it. I've got concerns about the transmission, which are probably ill-founded, but anybody that's going to be prudent and is going to want to talk about that car, you're going to be, one of the topics of discussion is going to be the robustness of that transmission. You just have to know that coming into it. So I'm not out of that camp. But that being said, so far as what I've seen, it'll manage a 100 shot really with no problem. So to me, ditch the nitrous, heads cam. I think the intake is where it's at. Really heads on that thing flow like crazy. But anyway, at least a cam. But the problem is, you can talk about all that you want. They haven't cracked the code on the car that I'm aware of for tuning. So we got a little bit of ways to go, but I think that right now is kind of a cool time to just watch the evolution of that car, because I would say within the next 5 years, that is going to be the darling of the aftermarket, and you're going to see a lot of guys going really fast with that thing. So, my only beef, that paper, man, I just can't see spending $90,000 on a hobby kit. It just doesn't. It doesn't sparkle with me. Let's see. Law is saying, he's just saying, FYI, Dodge will do up to stage 3 engine mods that don't void your warranty. Well, that depends. If you have a 5.7, you can go the Scat Pack route, which is true. In fact, they do Scat stages 1, 2, and 3. As long as they're installed by the manufacturer, or rather by the dealer, then those won't. But that's only if you have a 5.7. A 392, on the other hand, doesn't offer anything from FCA, no direct connection, no Dodge, no brotherhood of whatever muscle they want to talk about. They ain't doing nothing for the 392. So if you have a 5.7, great way to go, and maintain a warranty and pick up some power. Pick up a pretty decent chunk of power, as a matter of fact. However, if you've got a 392, which is kind of what I was talking about, I should have clarified that. Good point, by the way. Then you're on your own, unfortunately. Xcash is checking in and saying, on my 392, I want to put a ported intake, manifold, Hellcat throttle body, and some JBA mid-length headers. Will I need a tune? Yeah, wouldn't. Well, first of all, on your 392, you already have, JBA mid-length. So let's talk about that. Those JBAs are pretty good. They're just a bigger version of what you've already got. You'll pick up a little bit. We saw on the BBKs, I think it was like 8 horsepower or something like that. It's pretty decent jump, actually. Fitment was dog shit, though. Anyway, I am going to caution you on the Hellcat throttle body. And the only reason why I say that, ported intake manifold is great, but and believe me, I do a lot of them. This is kind of like something that I do know a little bit about. From your point of view, the throttle, here's your throttle body. I'm kind of exaggerating here. It comes in, down, and then curves around. Okay, that's basically how your point of view would look. The problem is from the side, if you can imagine my hand being that flat plane, it dips down like this. If you've ever seen the TA cold air intake, very similar jog to that. So basically it's offset like this. The problem is this lower, the short side. And what I do is I have to completely resculpt that, making sure that I don't go too deep, and also making sure that I understand that every one of these intake manifolds, the casting can be a little bit thinner or a little bit thicker, so I can have a little bit more, a little bit less material to go in there and sculpt and shape that as it makes that bottom turn to the right. But the issue, that what I'm getting at is that when you look at that cross section, there's not enough of a cross section to support a Hellcat throttle body. There just isn't. But that Fastman true through ported throttle body, when you measure it, actually is a perfect fit for a ported throttle body. I mean, I'm sorry, a ported intake manifold is that ported throttle body, and that's what I recommend with my ported intake. So, and again, I've got I have one manifold that's sneaking around out there. In fact, my buddy Quick Brick has got it on his car, and it's my personal intake manifold for 392s. It is. It is the most coarse shit. No, is it? Yeah, no. It is. It's the most. I think this is the one. I had two of them actually. Anyway, one of them was coarse shifted to hell. Figured if I could make any manifold make power, if I could make that one make power, I could make any of them make power. Anyway, that one is actually backfilled with epoxy. That's how much material I took out of it. So if you were to flip that intake upside down, you'd see the ridges on the back of it. I actually had to backfill that with epoxy. I took so much material out of it. And even then, when I measured it with my snap, the snaps that you use, the snap gauges, it did not, at any given point, side to side be obviously a little bit bigger, but there wasn't enough of a justification to run an 87. Let me get to the point here. Wasn't enough of justification to run an 87 millimeter throttle body. It just was not going to be any better. So my suggestion, ported intake manifold probably would go with peak speed if you need one like right now. But my suggestion is send them your intake manifold. Don't buy one from them and send yours back as a core. The reason for that is you would be surprised the problems that short runner valve can create for you. I don't want to get into details, but every once in a while you'll get a car that gets madder than hell at the pulse width modulation feedback or whatever it is from another manifold with even brand new short runner actuators, stock actuators, your own actuator, whatever. Lock the car down, send them your manifold, tell them to port your manifold and get your manifold back. Mark it, put your initials on the bottom of it, bleed on it, get your DNA on it, however you need to mark it, but make sure that it's your manifold. I do not do exchange manifolds. The only way I would suggest an exchange manifold is if you're putting a more modern intake manifold on, say, a 6.1, then it doesn't matter. And then you can just buy a manifold outright, get the window switch, and go through that headache. Picks up power, by the way. But if you're going to do that with your car, with your polymer intake, you're going to have to go that route. Just please trust me on this. You have no idea the headaches you can run into. Nathan's saying, Lon didn't know that. Let's see. Ruben's saying, I've seen you on Demonology's live feed with AJ. What do you think about Herman's new motor? So I don't have all the details on it. I haven't had a chance to really dive into that. I had planned on actually breaking him off a telephone call about 2 days ago, but I've been swamped. I haven't had a chance to talk to him about it. All things considered, from what I understand, I mean, obviously it's a built motor, going to make a ton of boost, that whole thing. It's great. The thing with me is anytime you start throwing the kitchen sink at motors, at blowers, and everything else, it turns it into a race car. And so let me just say this. What do I think about it? I think he's going to need every bit of that if he's going to try to run a number the way that Z is running, the way that B. Sanders is running. You've got some really fast guys right now. Funny that we're all from Texas, by the way. But you've got some really fast guys right now with the 8-speed cars that, they're all in the mid-8s. And when I say mid-8s, I don't mean like mid 860s. I'm talking about 851, 852 with overhead to be quicker. I mean, truth be told, Brian Sanders' car it's got 30s in it. So, you know, you've got 830s is what I'm getting at. So you've got to, I mean, if that's where you want to be, you're going to have to know that there are miles between, let me give you an example. The difference between an 850 and a 950 is so unbelievably scarily fast, to the point where, like, when you start getting into what is the difference between, let's say, a 10-second car and a 9-second car. Let's say a 1050 versus a 950. I can still see a 950 car running in front of me. You know, and it depends on how the car is getting there. But typically, you know, my viewpoint is like this. You know, 950, 1050. We're fast. But the difference between a 950 and an 850 car, or a 9.0 for that matter, in an 850 car, is bus lengths. You got to remember that a half second on an 850 car is like a second on a 12-second car. I mean, it's just the length is just ridiculous. So that's a ton of power to have to make up. And will it get there? Yeah, probably, because right now he's sitting at a 906, 907, 904, something like that, 90 something. And at that time, I want to say he was the fastest stock displacement 8-speed car, depending on who you talk to, what, you know, pages you look up or whatever. But he was in the conversation then, and now he's going to be able to really turn the wick up. So cheers. All the best to him, my buddy. Lon is saying, Makey saying, I'm waiting for the kits now. They have been down over COVID. Nothing's available. Oh, yeah, for sure. Oh, wait a minute. Hang on. Mach is checking in 1320. I love it, man. Thank you very much. Saying, how to be curious to hear your take on a killer chiller. Here's my thoughts on killer chiller. In the heat, they work great. Get the base kit. Don't get all the bells and whistles. Just get the base kit killer chiller. It'll take your intercooler temps from, let's say, 100 degrees, 120 degrees, down to 60 degrees in the matter of about a minute and a half to maybe 2 minutes, maybe 2.5 minutes, depending on ambient conditions. Turning everything to max, crank everything up as high as you can get it. Maybe 3 minutes. Anyway, it'll drag that temperature down. In other words, you get done with a pass, fire up the AC, drag that thing all the way back into the staging lanes, let it idle for a little bit, and that temperature will plummet. Fantastic thing. Now, in the cooler weather, it doesn't do a whole lot of good because your temperatures really aren't going to be that high, but you can drag them a little bit lower, but, you know, splitting hairs at that point. But during the summertime, they're awesome. I will say this, and again, please, if you get the Kincaid, get the base kit. Don't get all the valves and the this and the whatnot. Just, God, don't do it. I mean, there are cheaper ways to kick yourself in the balls, and just don't do it. The inner chiller, the bigger one, the Aussie one. Again, a great kit. It'll dump temperature faster than the Kincaid kit, so there's that. It's just a much higher capacity unit. It's just fitting it where you can fit it, basically. But, you know, either way you go, you're going to be in good shape. I like them for consistency. I don't run one on my car, but if I were to be just real serious about trying to cover a number, especially in the heat, I would probably go that route. More to the point, though, if I were really looking for more consistency, I would go that route as well. Now, when do they really start to help? That's the other question. We talked about ambient conditions and where that will assist. But in terms of how much heat can it deal with, double pulley cars run them all the time and have no problem with them whatsoever. Now, you may ask, well, what's the difference between that and the system that comes on the Hellcat and the Red Eye? A couple of things. One, you can run your Kincaid or the interchiller as long as you want to, or whenever you want to. The system in the Demon will not run if the ambient temperature is less than 58 degrees or if the coolant temperature goes below 58. My understanding is it won't run then. Whereas the Kincaid or the interchiller, you can bring that thing down as low as you can possibly get it. And it's also more efficient. It's just a physically bigger unit. So there's that. Just like a little bit of, I don't know, trivia. I think I want to say the Demon is targeting like 110 degrees is if you look at the target temperature. So kind of goofy on that anyway, but not that it won't run any lower than that. It's just kind of a weird thing that I had noticed one day playing with the Demons. Let's see, but awesome question. Let's see. Hopefully that helps you. And also, too, that mod in concert with spacers and a blanket could potentially be a good thing for you. But the good thing is that Killer Chiller by itself, the Kincaid, the base unit, does a really good job. Racer X runs that on his and loves it. Let's see. Jason Cars is saying, if you had 40 grand to blow on a manual sports car, good handling car, what would you buy? For 40 grand, okay, well, C6Z06. That would be my first weapon of choice. Second, though, to that would be, because we can find them down here for that price. But a regular C6 Corvette be another good choice on that. Have a lot more money to spend on it after that. If we're talking about new, 40 grand. To say it, guys, be a Mustang GT. And the reason for that is you can do anything in the world that you want with a Mustang GT, and you can pick that up for less than 40 grand also. Out the door. I mean, you're gonna have to do a little haggling, but you'll get there. And I like the Mustang better primarily because it's a lot more mod friendly. I mean, don't get me wrong, love me some Mopar, but gotta be real with you. I mean, if you're really gonna be taking this thing to an autocross track or to a closed circuit, if you're gonna want to do some roll racing, some higher speed things, maybe like canyon carving, Mustang's probably the way to go. All that being said, by the way, one of the leading SCCA cars down here at Motorsports Ranch is a Hellcat. So Hellcat's whooping all kinds of vet ass right now down here in Houston at a closed circuit. Who says the big girl can't run and handle? But hopefully that, I mean, it depends on, okay, so you want something that handles well. Mustang handles pretty well. But you can upgrade it to do whatever you want it to do. So you can upgrade it drag-wise, upgrade it road racing style. There's just a lot that you can do with that. So let's see. Aside from it just depends on what you really want to do. If you're looking to do a lot of closed circuit racing and you want to have enough money in the kitty for tires and fuel and oil changes and clutches or whatever. Really, even with that, the Mustang's the only way to go because it's a lot cheaper to replace parts. In other words, if you're going to campaign something or if you're just going to have something that you want to, further a skill set with, it's cheaper to fix a Mustang than it is a Vet, but the Vet you could probably pick up cheaper on the used car lot. So, Lon's saying he's waiting for a rear seat right now. Yeah, dang COVID for sure. And he's saying, and Mankey, when they do the mods, they also install a factory performance tune, just so you know. So you know, that was developed through Arrington back in the day. That was the SCAT packages, I want to say, were all done through Arrington. What were they? It was like 5 years ago. maybe even 6 years ago. But again, it would have to be for a 5.7. The 392 is getting no love. Yeah, some for our guys saying C6Z06. Yep. Or 4th gen or 5th gen Camaro Z28. The only downside to the 5th gen Camaro is weight, but you get an LS3. And you bring up a good point. You do see a lot of those on the street for good reason, and they're really good cars, practically bomb-proof. A little bit on the heavy side, but you'd never notice it. You get yourself a 6-speed 5th gen, and you're not going to be wanting or needing. You can always throw cam, heads, intake, obviously exhaust. You can mess around and you can screw up and build a car that'll put on a Mustang dyno to the rear wheels 430, 440, even 450 horse to the rear wheels. And on a Mustang dyno, as installed in the car, that is a lot of power. I mean, on a regular dyno, that'd be about a 550, 570 horsepower engine. So there's nothing you can't do with a with an LS. Jeff is asking thoughts on rumored Mach 1 making 5.25 and 450. Man, you know, I had heard about that, and they were talking about the Mach 1 being a more track-focused car than the GT350. It was going to be this next evolution of the GT350 or something along those lines. Shit. Okay, look, here are my thoughts about that. I like the idea of the Mach 1, but my vision of the Mach 1 is not canyon carving. It's nothing like that. Oddly enough, there's a guy here in town with a yellow and black, absolutely gorgeous 71 Mach 1. Love that body style. My favorite body style, by the way. But when I see that type of car, I'm thinking street brawler. I'm thinking street race. I'm thinking badass small block, geared to the hill, just, you know, just a badass car all the way around. Love those cars. If it's going to be along those lines, you know, a little bit more street, a little bit less track, get a little bit of the fart sniffer out of that car, and make it something that's just overall a cool, badass car that does well at the drag strip, canyon carving, cruising, the whole bit. If that car can do that, it'll get my attention. But here's the problem. It's freaking bug just fell on my... The problem is this. You've got to remember that that engine, if they're going to put it in there, say it's going to be the Voodoo motor, that engine is great, but it's got to have an automatic backing it up for it to really stand out, honestly. Consider this. You rarely see, and again, this is me being at the drag strip practically every Friday. I'm there at least twice a month, okay? Every once in a while, you'll see a GT350. Every once in a while, you'll see a GT350R. And they never really do that well. And the reason why they don't do that well is because it's a high winding engine with a transmission that is not going to allow it to launch properly. Not to mention the fact nobody's really launching those cars that hard. You don't see anybody on a drag pack, or at least it's rare when you do. And to get the thing out of the hole, it really needs a little bit more gear. Like to the tune of 430s, or at least a set of 410s. I mean, the 373s are adorable, but when you got a thing that revs like that car, you've got to give it every advantage that you can. So all of that being said, could you possibly imagine that engine with a 10-speed automatic in a 373? Holy shit. I mean, you talk about an embarrassment to practically everything else at a drag strip. If they did that and called it a Mach 1, solid. I'm on board with that because, think about it. You finally get your hot rod back. You get all the powers, you get all the transmissions, and you get all the street cred at that point. GT350 doesn't have that. It's got, again, a little bit, you know, it's a little bit aloof. Mustangs can't be aloof. It's stupid. So, that's what I would like to see it morph into. And fortunately, I don't think my thoughts and my hopes and wishes are going to be listened to very concertedly by Ford. But I will say this. If they screwed up and made that car, it would be very, very tempting. Let's see. Don Power saying, what? No Dr. Dib? I don't know what he's up to tonight. Don Power saying, hello, Mr. Mason. Hello, Mr. Powers. Chase Carr is saying, as some Ferrari guy, I'm 6 foot tall and 210. I don't fit in the Camaro. So, to that point, you and I are about the same height. I'm a little bit shorter than that, but I am I'm basically the same weight. I didn't fit in the Camaro at all. I found the Camaro to be the most uncomfortable thing I had ever driven. But all of that went away the first time I drove a CL1. So, do with that what you will. But no, you're right. It's so claustrophobic. You're sitting there and the window starts here. It's just a little bit claustrophobic. Jason Carr, even with the seat in the low setting. So my thing is, I didn't like the gauge cluster. The gauge cluster is like here, at least to here on me. And it just, I don't know, it gave people, okay, this is what used to piss me off. Whenever the C6, or the C6, the 6th gen came out, people would say, oh, you sit in the Camaro, but you sit on a Mustang. That's what journalists would say. I just want to, journalists. Anyway, I thought that was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard, because have they never driven any? You sit in a Corvette, okay? You sit in a Viper. You are trapped by a Camaro. And a Mustang is a car. It's a normal car. You sit in that thing the way you would sit in any other vehicle. So, I get what they were trying to convey, but they were trying to make the Mustang sound like a truck, and it just, when you know better and you hear somebody talking bullshit, you just want to call them out on bullshit, but unfortunately it just doesn't play that way. Let's see, Chase Carr is saying, must be nice. I don't. Also, C606 are going for way cheaper than 40 grand. Well, that's the good thing about it, though. You get 40 grand, and you're able to get the car, by the way, get the heads worked, right? I mean, that's the first thing you do with the C06, with the LS7. But it gives you options. You know, if you want road racing, you can get, shoes for that. You want drag racing, you got shoes for that. Cam, intake, all of that is going to be at least at your disposal with that kind of money. So depending on how I would interpret the question, if somebody says, here's 40 grand, build you a hot rod, I'm C6 Z06, first car out of the gate. Second to that would be the lowest possible optioned C6 that I could find. So there would be that option on the table as well. Just because I love low option cars. I think they're the coolest. Let's see. And again, Mile High Man, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Oh, some Ferrari guys saying nice ones will be 35 or spend 5K on mods. That's me too. Hey, Sean Heath, a nugget for the 5.3 till the 400 goes and 10. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. Sean and I were talking earlier. So if y'all are on my Instagram, there's a picture of me working on the truck. Basically, I'm replacing cab mounts. It's kind of a safety issue with these older trucks is that the cab sits on the frame, and no joke, right? I get that. But you've got the bushings, basically the mounts that the truck sits on. Those go bad over time and they need to be replaced. Well, mine were 48 years old. So when I replaced them, it was kind of funny too, because the cab was kicked over to one side and it was sadness all the way around. So anyway, those bolts are welded to the cab, and so you've got to cut the weld off the bolts, get the old bolts out. As a matter of fact, I think I had shown them. I don't have them sitting here. Anyway, the bolts, the farthest rear cab bolts had just turned into nothing. They were like the width of little sippy straws. And I'm going to see if I can find it. Anyway, they're about the width of sippy straws. I was actually worried when I was taking them off that they were going to snap. Luckily, I caught them just in time, and it's got all new hardware. It's got energy suspension cab mounts on. I just need to do the core support mounts. Haven't done those yet, but it's great. The cab sits level, and anyway, the point of all of that was he and I were talking about what to do with the truck. It's got a 400 small block in it. Cool engine if you put the time and effort into it. Actually, you can make a ton of power with it, like an obnoxious amount of power with that engine. But you got to put money, you got to put time into it. It was never really designed as a hot rod engine. It was more of a coming into a smog era engine, something that would make really good torque and just chug along. It's the gasoline equivalent of a diesel engine. Ford had one with the 400M, same kind of value. You saw them in Monte Carlos, pickup trucks, vans, things like that. In other words, a great torquey engine with a lot of potential. I mean, we're talking you can accidentally make 550 horsepower with this thing with torque to match like that. Again, 4.25 stroke, 370. I'm sorry, 4.25 bore, 370 stroke. But here's the thing, you can do a freaking complete LS swap. Now, think of it like this. I can find an old Tahoe for $2,500. Use that as the donor, gut it. That way I've got all the sensors that I need, find a good run one, all the sensors that I need, a vetted engine, transmission, the whole bit, everything works fine. Eviscerate the Tahoe, put everything into the truck, and then sell the roller for $750, whatever. And just route a manifold, route an exhaust off the manifolds until I put long tubes in it or whatever. You can do all of that for, say, $3,500, maybe $4,000 at the most, right? Because you got to factor in a drive shaft and everything else. Well, the problem with that is that's time consuming and it's a pain in the ass, but the upshot is huge because you get all of the convenience of having a modern drivetrain. The alternative to that, though, is to build the 400. The problem with building the 400 is that I don't have an overdrive transmission, which means it's going to suck on the highway, especially with 430 gears, haha. But the other thing is the cost of it. Heads, $1,500. Intake manifold, $280. Carburetor, another $400. You can see where this is going, and the more you start adding this up, plus I've got to put an electric fuel pump on it anyway because E10 boils just if you stare at it long enough. Cars now, carbureted stuff goes into vapor lock way easier than it used to. So you look at it and go, yeah, I could build this badass 400 and that'd be cool, but I could just about do 2 LS swaps for the cost of it. And really, I go 5.3, 224 cam, it doesn't matter. A set of long tubes, a tune, you're looking at, I don't know, 400 horsepower. So, and you get overdrive, more aggressive gearing, and I've already got the 430 gears. You want to talk about doing long, smoky burnouts until you just get bored with it. That's what to do. So, anyway, that's what we were talking about today. What to do with the truck. But probably get the truck running, driving, get it straight. I know I'm going to have to spend the money twice, but I'm going to play with the 400 until the 400 just gives up the ghost and then LS swapper. Or if the 400 never croaks and I can't make it die, then it'll be put a 700 R4 in it and just call it good. See, Cash is saying, Will Do was just going to buy an intake manifold and keep the original so I don't have to do a tune. Yeah, you don't have to do a tune. If you're just doing a manifold, don't worry about the tune, but save yourself the money and the headache with that throttle body and just go with the 84. Shawnee's saying, I hadn't ported my 392 intake, cleaned up the molding flash, 3 to 5 horsepower, hard to say. Any thoughts? Depends on the intake manifold. So the earlier ones had a lot of casting flash in there. And the early ones were core shifted like you would not believe. Mine, the one that I was working on for my car had a core shift that was just under 1/4 of an inch to the back. To the back, yeah. So the lower section, if you're looking at it like this is the front of the intake, this is the back of the intake. The lower section was shifted back this way, so that there was actually a ridge running through each one of the runners. It was crazy. Anyway, but yeah, the earlier ones had a little bit more casting flash. The later ones are actually pretty clean, but there are transitions in the manifolds about as far up into the manifold as you can get with a rat tail, where if you can clean up the transitions, open it up just a little bit and make that transition smooth, which is easy to say. It didn't take me any time to say that, but I kid you not, I spend about 8 hours on every intake that I do. If you can get it right, you can pick up, around 5 horsepower across the board. That with the throttle bodies can usually net you a pretty decent gain all the way across the board. So, and I've even seen, with cam cars, well, especially with cam cars, where you're making the intake runner a little bit less active, that manifold will get you down to, say, 1/2 an inch, even a little bit less than 1/2 an inch of mercury. And to give you an idea, that would be the equivalent at peak torque. And then maybe 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches of mercury at peak RPM. And that's what you would want to have. Like if you've got a carbureted setup, that would be like your maximum performance effort, like you've sized everything just right. That's where that manifold will get you, especially with a cam with that throttle body. And I know that because I've got the data on that. So one of the first things I looked at on Rob's car, by the way. Let's see. David is saying, hey, from Canada. Hey, Dave. Saying, really learned a lot of info from your Mopar live chats over the last year or so. I have a Challenger 5.7 with an Edelbrock supercharger. Loads of fun. Hey, awesome, man. Thank you very much. I would say that that's the best, like, overall fun package. Like, if I was putting something together, I would absolutely go that route with a 5.7 because you get the best of all the worlds there, man. You get a package that makes great power, makes a little bit better torque than a 392, is not hard on the transmission, is lively as sin, and with an aftermarket tune, you can get even more aggressive with it than that. You can always pulley it up. To me, that's one of the most fun packages that I've ever driven, so congrats on that, my man. I'm actually a little bit jealous. Good job on that. Shawnee is asking, what's an 850 take for horsepower to run at 4,000 pounds? At 4,000 pounds, you're going to need about 12 to 1,400 horsepower. Let's see. Dollar Power is asking, okay, Mr. Mason, what intakes should pull from the You Pull and Pay trucks, cars, years, and I'll even get some for you, Mason, on Craigslist under 1969 Cornet Green. Unbelievably good shape, $13,000 in League City. Yeah, should have bought it. I wish I could. Let's see, what intakes should pull from the You Pull and Pay trucks, cars, years. Even get some for you. Let's see. Well, if we're talking about intakes, man, I'm having a hard time understanding the question. But as far as for the Hemis, you only want the 392 if you're wanting to do like a swap over. And that would just be any of the 392 car intakes. If we're talking about truck intakes, the truck intake's actually really good. If you've got, they're a little bit higher, but they're a decent intake. They're actually kind of like the 392 intake. The runners are very, very similar, as a matter of fact. With the only difference being where that throttle body is. It's got kind of a goofy looking snout that it uses for the throttle body. But anyway, but yeah, no, there's some cars coming up here lately too, by the way, and kind of wish I would have held out a little bit, but I'm happy with the truck. And the other cool thing about the truck, getting parts is, well, easier. I will say this though, you would think again that it would be like tripping over, you would be tripping over them. And it's not quite like that. And also too, getting the right parts is not quite as easy as you might think. So, yeah, anyway, you're kind of stuck and relegated with a certain type of header and with a certain, there's just some pain in the asses that I'm learning along the way. I do desperately need to go, I need to get an electric fuel pump for it for sure. That's going to help. Electric fuel pump and a fuel pressure regulator, only to force it to create, because the truck is a return style. It's 72. The later, early 70 trucks had a return style fuel system, which is great. Basically, it kept the fuel moving around at the pump, but the problem is it's still a deadhead from the pump to the carburetor. In this instance, it would be fuel pump run to the carburetor, then to the back on the firewall or to the fender well or whatever, a regulator, and then from the regulator to the return, which would basically make it a through return without a deadhead, which is kind of what you're looking for to kill that that stupid vapor lock freaking problem that I'm running into. Slash is saying, sup man. Jeff is saying, Sean, I'd say 1200. Yeah, you're gonna need somewhere, yeah, like I was saying, 12 to 1400 is what you're gonna need at that power level. And what's funny too, by the way, it's, man, 12 to 14, that's another 200 horsepower. Another 200 horsepower ain't nothing when you start getting into those numbers. You got to remember that a 1,000-foot DA change is going to make a huge difference with a car making that much power. So, yeah, believe me when I tell you, it's not that big of a difference. Let's see. Argue saying currently 1112 GT500 shopping. Nice car, by the way. Is that in a spot between spanking 392s and being embarrassed by Hellcat's 392 entire or 373 entire? So I wouldn't call it spanking 392s. You've got to remember that your GT500 is a lot of fun, and you guys have heard me say this so much. You already know what I'm about to say. Just here it comes. I'm shocked that I don't have one sitting in my garage. I have had more fun raising all kinds of hell with GT500s over the years when I was a much dumber version of myself today. Which isn't saying much, but you can get the picture. But a GT500 on a tire isn't going to embarrass a 392. I've actually put a couple of them in my rearview mirror. But that being said, there's one thing that the 392 contraption, it doesn't matter if it's manual or automatic, it will never ever be able to replicate the driving experience that you get in a GT500. I don't like talking about numbers when I'm talking about GT500s because they never ever run the number that the power would suggest that they could. A lot of that has to do with driver. A lot of it has to do with the tire that they're running. They're heavy. Can be a bit of a challenge to get to hook up. I understand all of that. But take that out of the equation and just drive the thing. And you can't drive a GT500 and not be grinning like the Cheshire Cat. That thing is so much fun on a drag radial just to have kicking around. Put it like this, every single time I drove a GT500, if I was making a U-turn, I was exiting sideways. Every single time. The only times I didn't do that in the GT500s that I was driving is if there was a car in front of me and I couldn't do it. I absolutely love those cars in a way that it was always like having a buddy with you that you're out to kind of do dumb shit. Like you woke up that morning and over coffee said, let's go do some stupid shit. You want to do some dumb shit? Fuck yeah, I want to do some dumb shit. All right. That's the GT500. That's the conversation that you have with yourself every time you get into that car. You can't really do that. I mean, you can with a 392, but they're a little bit more lumbering. And they don't just have that kind of power that a GT500 does, just going watt at about 4,000 RPM. They do, but they don't. Hellcat, it's not even a fair fight because the Hellcat with the automatic and the power and the weight, and especially if the guy snuck in a 309 gear and he's on a drag pack like Little Miss Revlon, it's not a sexy race at all. It's not cool. And it's not really fair to compare the two because the driving experience is dynamically different. It's not even close. But if you do get yourself a GT500, consider yourself super lucky. Take care of that thing. Know that I'm jealous as shit, but they are still to this day the most fun car just to go out and act like a dumbass in and just enjoy it, the fun, the sound, the everything about those cars will do nothing but enhance your day. So go with that, and don't worry about the numbers and the times, and everything else will only serve to put the car in a comparative light that it doesn't deserve to be in. And that is, by the way, one of the very, very few cars that I will ever speak on as I speak on the GT500. As far as I'm concerned, everything else can be thrown underneath a microscope, but the GT500 and the Lightning are the two that my brain will not allow that comparative analysis just because of the fun factor that those things bring to the table is so strong. White Knuckles in, say, what up, B? Got the arm flex and the bump. I like it. Say, is the BBK 85mm throttle body an actual 85mm bore? I think that one is. However, I would still suggest going with the Fastman, mainly because that's what I've got the most experience with, and that 84 is a true 84. But if you can get your hands on an 85, go with that one. The only one that's not is going to be the MMX ported throttle body, which is to say that they've just radiused the inside of the throttle body a little bit. I think that one's 87. Y'all correct me, but I think it's 87. You know what? The BBK, it is a true 85. Here's the thing, though. That only works if your manifold is ported to accept and truly accept an 85mm throttle body. And you got to really open them up on the intake side, especially in the throat area on that transition. And that's tough to do. And like I say, even my manifolds, when I get real aggressive with them, 84 is about as much as they'll actually accommodate. So just so you know. Some Fryer guy at Chasing Cars told you. Shawnee's saying, White Knuckle, get the Fastman. Absolutely. Scatspeed's checking in saying, what up, B-Mason? Got the arm flex. I like it. HE37 saying, the Camaro is also a good handling car that can be had for around 40 grand. The GM Alpha is outstanding. It is outstanding. The problem is that a lot of guys don't like it because it's so non-conformative with what they're used to. And not to mention the fact a lot of guys just don't fit it very well. And, you know, the ergonomic part, let me tell you this. Nobody does ergonomics from a performance standpoint like Ford. And nobody does ergonomics from just a comfortable, badassery, long distance, make your life nice standpoint than Mopar. Camaro, again, falls into that. Remember, we always talk about this. Mustang bookends of the driving experience. Lots of high-end horsepower, lots of bottom and mid-range grunt. Very fun to drive, very fun to drive. Camaro, yeah, but then everything about the Camaro is a downturn. It's not an upturn, and for the Camaro to win, it has to beat both. Unfortunately, it doesn't, and ergonomics checks in here as well. My take on it was that it was probably the most uncomfortable out of all three, Others have said even worse than that. And I put a video out like right when that car came out. I was checking them out, and I couldn't have said anything good about the car at the time. Now with the ZL1 and the 2LE, I get it. They're nice cars, okay? They fit some folks, but they don't fit more folks than they fit. And as time has gone by, I will admit, to some extent, they're growing on me, especially the later ones, the newest version of those cars, growing on me a little bit. So I will concede in some areas, but I will not in the area of ergonomics, and they're still basically sucking hind tit when it comes to that breakdown. Oh, Ferocious is saying, purchased a Hellcat Charger today, 2015 with 45,000 miles. What do you suggest should be the mandatory maintenance items I should knock out first besides an oil change? So you got yourself a 15. Check your build date, first and foremost. If you got 45,000 miles on it, you probably don't have any issues with the supercharger, the snout bearings, right about there, tickling it right now. So chances are you're beyond that, just as far as things to look at. Aside from that, knock out a coolant flush, knock out a the intercooler flush as well. You should be in good shape. Have your techs just check the condition of the transmission fluid, but more than likely it'll be okay. I've seen with over 100,000 miles that had never even been touched. And those cars were beaten on like a rented mule. So check that. Diff fluid, I would probably swap out. Don't forget your bottle of friction modifier. You're going to need it. Do not put synthetic in the rear end. Only use Mopar. Only use ZF. Do not let anybody tell you otherwise. Do not let anybody steer you differently. They are wrong. They don't know what they're talking about. They're going off of generalizations, and we have already found that it doesn't work well when you go with a different route. So make sure it is the ZF limited slip fluid that you get, and you're going to need the bottle of friction modifier. Don't forget to put the bottle of friction modifier into the quart and shake it and then install it. Or you can put it into the diff and then squirt it in that way. Either way, make sure that you put it in the diff, the friction modifier. Aside from that, you're good. Hellcat's a very, very robust platform. In terms of durability, I don't know of any modern car that from the factory can handle just the level of abuse that the Hellcats can, either with transmission, blower. I've seen them, listen, from working at a shop, I've seen these things show up with all kinds of weird modifications, tunes, stuff like that, and the cars still keep on trucking. So you got to work to hurt them, and not saying that they're bomb-proof, but you do have to work a little bit to hurt them. But all that being said, anything that is a fluid, swap it out. Tranny, just check it out and you'll be in good shape. Things to look at though, maintenance items. Rotor, right here, check the lip on that rotor. If you get a real pronounced lip, you may need a new set of rotors. Those are about $1,200. Go with Demon Speed, I think is the name of the company. They make a lighter, I wouldn't call it a lightweight, but it's a lighter rotor, save you about 12 pounds total. Go with that, it's a good replacement part. Brake pads are a big deal on Hellcats, especially if it's had stock pads on it for any real length of time. They beat the living hell out of the rotors, so just something to consider. What are they, what do I put on this thing, guys? The Speed Stop 26s? Anyway, go with those. Not quite the initial bite of the stock pads, but you get used to them and they're fine. I mean, I've had this car over 150 miles an hour in data collecting, testing, all of that so many times. It just all over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. They woe this car just fine. So that's another thing to look at. What else is there? Just things that I've noticed, getting kind of funky. Just weird stuff that can go weird with these cars. Don't forget your belts too, by the way. Shawnee's saying, Ferocious 1980, welcome to the Hellcat Club. Absolutely, brother. Welcome to the litter. Catalyst 99, do you like the Dodge Neon SRT4 and are they worth pursuing? Catalyst, I would like to invite you to go into my playlist, go into the My Thoughts section and find my thoughts on the SRT4. You will find that I have a crush on that car that is long-standing and has, well, to this point, I have never had or driven a car that was as much of a freaking laugh riot as I have with the SRT4. Funny story, at the VOI, this Viper Owner Invitational in 2003. Was it 2003? 2003, 2004, 2000. Anyway, right around that area. This was at Texas World, and they had us running on the infield of Texas World. It was kind of like an autocross course in a way. And it was myself, cannot remember the guy's name, guy from Australia. He and I were vying for #1 and #2 at VOI. You talk about a group of guys that are about as competitive as it gets. And we got to the point where we were just seeing how far we could smoke the inside tire coming off of one of the last turns onto a straightaway. They are a freaking ton of fun, and you can make them go as fast as you want it to go. Down here in Houston, we've got probably at least 10 SRT4s that are running around that are mid 9-second cars. Anywhere from, I'll put it like this, anywhere from say an 11.0 to low 9s. You've got that spectrum all covered up with, I'd say about 3/4 of those being street driven cars. So roll racing an SRT4 in that level of tune with bigger turbo and everything, put you like this, they will absolutely embarrass fools that they would think had no business messing around with those cars. So I love them. They're a shitload of fun. Again, you know, if unlimited funds and unlimited time would have an SRT4 that I would have as a just straight up roll race car, anyway, I've had a lot of fun with SRT4s over the years, and I remember them fondly back in the day when they were putting a hurting on a lot of LS powered cars, and Camaros, F-bodies primarily. And it was just fun. It was a neat time back then because Dodge had done something kind of cool at that point. You had the Viper. You had no answer for the Mustang. This is far before the Challenger. But there was no Mustang for F-body. No answer for F-body, no answer for the Mustang, except the freaking SRT4, which was, it's kind of like that kid that goes, I want to play, and you're like, nah, you pick him like second to last, and it's always like Rudy, the kid that, makes the tackle or makes the touchdown or, runs the last leg of the sprint, It's that car, it's that guy, that's that car, right? So you would discount it, you wouldn't give it any play, you wouldn't do anything, and then from a roll race, these things would kill Vipers on the street, and it was just hysterical. I mean, what the shit is this? Anyway, I used to love that about those cars. They obviously, that kind of power comes with you're going to start finding weak links with it, but leave it on street tires and just use the front tires as a fusible link, and I don't know. Anyway, got a lot of them down here that are really fast, and I love those cars. H237 saying, don't you think Ford wanted to place more of the emphasis on track as opposed to the drag strip once they eliminated the live axle? The independent rear suspension really changed the personality of the Mustangs. That was an inevitable evolution of that car. So, no, I don't know that I would really agree with that, only because they have drag mode. And so you kind of look at that and go, okay, well, on a tire, realistically, it doesn't matter. You taking the GT500 out of the conversation because there's a lot of witchcraft going into making that car launch on a street tire. None the least of which is just power mitigation. The big issue that you have by moving to the independent rear suspension isn't necessarily traction, it's the suspension's deflection. So, you know, if you have a shock setup that's, you know, or a strut setup that's going to help to mitigate that a little bit, you'll be in decent shape. But as far as that, the live axle being the end-all be-all for drag racing, we've proven that, you know, with the modern cars, it just doesn't matter. I mean, look, we're running 850s with these Hellcats, or I mean, as a community, we're running 850s with these things. Stock suspension, at least stock suspension geometry. With Hellcats, I mean, think about that for a minute. So I think with the Mustang, yeah, you could say that a little bit, but again, it was just more of an organic evolution of that platform. You know, the tire is going to make up for the difference in the camber that you're going to lose, so to speak, by going negative camber when the car squats. Not a whole lot to worry about. Plus, you got guys right now, I mean, look how fast the Mustangs are. You got 8-second Mustangs running around on stock suspension, so obviously it's not hurting too much. Let's see. Hang on just a second. Shawnee's checking out, saying, good night, B, and everybody catch up on the stream Sunday. Awesome, brother. Appreciate that. Ken797, thank you very much, man. I appreciate the contribution to the cause. Didn't have a question with it. Kind of buzzed down to the bottom of it, but thank you very much, man. I truly appreciate that, Ken. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, shoot me a question, man. Hopefully I can answer something for you. Hopefully I can help. But thank you very much. Appreciate you thinking enough to contribute. Ruben saying, I'm 5'4", and when I sat in the ZL1, it was like sitting in the front row at the movie theater. Hated that car for just how high the dash cluster was. Yeah, so let me tell you the problem here. Okay, you guys know that when I've talked about the old Viper, one of the biggest issues is that it didn't sell with females because it didn't have an automatic transmission, where the Corvette has a very diverse audience, and it fits a lot of folks. You can like it. You can be Michael Jordan, who's famously big into Corvettes. You could be 6'7", or you could be 4'7", and you can still drive the car. Viper wouldn't like that. Well, the problem with the Camaro kind of has the same value going for it. If you're a little bit shorter, it's a tougher car to manage. You know, and so it's like, how does Corvette work so well, yet Camaro fails so miserably? It's like they didn't have the forethought to figure this out. Anyway, the Camaro does not do as well with females, and because of that, that's one of the other reasons why they're kind of getting stung right now. Ruben saying, I'm 5'5", I know what you mean. Absolutely. Ruben saying, one of the reasons I got the Hellcat was the amazing seat adjustment. I'm telling you, that's one of the cool things about these cars. T saying, has anybody mentioned how cool that shirt is B is wearing? Fried chicken and gasoline. I wish I'd come up with that. Actually, if you know me well enough, you know that I am a huge fan of B-rated horror flicks, and this Fried Chicken and Gasoline is actually Captain Spaulding from House of a Thousand Corpses. So, but it blends into my two favorite things. You'll always find me strapped with at the house, which is well, you may not know this, but when I was a walk-on at University of Houston. I was a defensive back in college, and across the practice field, we had a Popeyes fried chicken, and basically at about 2:30 to 3:30 every day, they were coming off of the lunch rush. And so they would always have in the rack about 15 or 20 chicken strips. So I kind of made a deal. I would go in there, and basically for, I think it was like $7, I could get all the chicken strips that were on the rack. So anyway, going back to some old college days stuff for you, but yeah, there's also a bit of an inside. There's an inside joke there because I was broke as shit, and I lived. I mean, it was, the only thing I had money for was gas. So it was like food was Popeyes every day, and gas was like the only thing I could afford to put in my truck. So anyway, there's a lot of time when you see shirts that I'm wearing, guys, a lot of times there's Easter eggs in the shirts that I'm wearing. There's a backstory to it. The shirts are not just, some of them are pretty cool shirts, but this one is kind of cool because there's like multiple meanings in this one. Not to mention red, white, and blue, baby. Shawnee is saying, I'm a bit on the fat side. The Challenger is such a comfortable muscle car. Just drove a 2020 Mustang GT. It fit well, actually. Yeah, the Mustangs have great ergonomics. That's one of my favorite things about them. HU37 is saying, if I had a choice of the 400 or the 5.3, it's the latter. Modern drivetrain that is more efficient, has good power. I'd get rid of the 400. Unfortunately, here's the thing. Unfortunately, that's kind of the way you almost have to go. Because here's the other twist to this. Small block Chevy stuff, you would think, again, it would be super cheap. But it's not. I mean, it still costs significant amounts of money. The cylinder heads are expensive. The intake manifold's expensive. Carburetors, by the way, are expensive. And, I mean, how the hell is a carburetor expensive? Anyway, all of this stuff that you have to spend money on to get that engine to make horsepower. Now, it makes a shitload of torque, but it's the horsepower that it just can't make. In fact, it makes peak power where most engines are just lumbering into making peak torque. In fact, I think this engine's rated at 32 or 3,500 RPM. Like I said, it's a gasoline-powered diesel is the way you almost have to look at it. So from that standpoint, yeah, it's got a lot of tip-in torque, but even when you're wide open with it, well, I can't really even do that because the transmission's cooked, but Dr. Diff, it's coming your way, by the way, soon. But the thing is it's such a difficult proposition when you look at it from just a performance per dollar point of view. I mean, the whole idea of having a Chevy is it's cheap horsepower. But I'm learning along the way that cheap isn't very cheap, and even the parts availability, there's little things that just don't really add up, especially when you start talking about like a 400. All the parts interchange-ish, you start getting into this kind of twilight zone area. So basically, I'm looking at it like this. I mean, yeah, I want to make the 400 work in the short term. If it works out long term, fantastic. But I'll be having my eye on that 5.3. And again, 5.3, 224 cam, 4L60 with just a little bit of a warm over refresh. Crack open the 5.3, throw a little bit of ring gap at it with the cam, and I mean, you got yourself a winning combination that'll run, I mean, 300, 400,000 miles. So what can you do? Plus, here's the Achilles heel of the 400 is that they're known for side loading the cylinders. And what that means, they got a shorter rod and compared to a 350. And because of that shorter rod, the leverage on the cylinder is greater to the outside. They have a tendency, what's called egging out the cylinders. Damn it. I mean, that's a problem. And the other way around that is to run a longer rod. But when you run a longer rod, got some turmeric in this, by the way. Makes it taste good, but jacks me the throat. The problem is if this is your piston, like say this is like a half of a piston, in that rod, if my thumb is the oil control ring, that the wrist pin comes up into that oil control ring a little bit. It's a little bit overblown here, but I'm trying to show you this to illustrative purposes, right? The problem with that is that you get the piston rocking a little bit, and again, blow-by becomes the issue. So they're prone to blow-by anyway. They're short rod, they're going to egg out the cylinder and makes boring it a pain in the ass. It's just got some things that aren't working great for it, man. So that's another reason why I was really considering that LS swap. Ferocious is saying, thanks, Sean. I've been wanting one since they came out. Awesome, man. Zephyr checking in, saying, what up, Professor Mason? Got the fist bump. I like it. Shawnee's checked out. Thank you again, brother. Donald Power is saying, sorry for the confusion, but I got it. Avoid the intake with the hard turn. Oh, yeah. Avoid the intake with the hard turn. Absolutely. Yeah, go with the 6.4. Zephyr is saying, we're doing some major body work after some nasty hail. Oh, bummer. I'm considering doing wide body flares and fenders, Hellcat front bumper and Hellcat fiberglass hood. That'd be pretty cool. I'd say go for it. I mean, if you're going to be in there anyway, might as well do it. 6.1 car, sure. Hell yeah, I'd do it. Do it in a heartbeat. Xcash is saying there's nothing like a big block over LS. See, here's the thing. The 400 is it acts like a big block. It wants to be a big block. It desperately wants to be a big block, but it doesn't have, it's kind of like, it's just a small block on roids in the most common way of looking at it, in that the pitfalls are all there for the 400. And again, making power isn't the problem. Yeah, I mean, it's basically C-spot run super easy to make 530 horsepower and 570 foot-pounds of torque. 470 foot-pounds of torque with a 400. In fact, it's pretty easy, as a matter of fact, with lots of tip-in torque, especially with that 370 stroke. The problem comes when you're making, especially with that type of tip-in torque, you run into problems potentially with transmission, but this thing not so much. It's not that heavy, and it's got a turbo 350 in it, but you can build a turbo 350 to handle anything. But it's all the pitfalls, the issues with the cylinder side loading and the this and the that and the that. And it's just, and not to mention, it's still carbureted. And to make carburation work, you got to run the pump. You've got to run it through a fuel pressure regulator to create a true circuit, not a deadhead circuit to the carburetor. And to do all that ends up costing money. And you go, well, how much money does it cost? How expensive could it be? Well, in this case, that's not a very expensive modification, but it's still going to run you about $300, $400, and you end up $300 and $400 your life away on one of these projects. Whereas you just switch the thing over to LS, cry once, and it's all done. Now, I don't have that kind of time, and I'm going to give the 400 its due, only because it's kind of cool to have a 400 small block. There are some cool areas, especially you throw a 4-barrel on it, mid-length headers, put a decent exhaust system on it. You're looking at somewhere around, 300-ish horsepower, maybe 270 horsepower, with a ton of torque and a lot of tip-in torque, which makes these things a lot of fun to drive. You don't get that with the LS. In fact, it's going to kind of be a little bit numb until it spools up a little bit. And tip-in torque is a lot of fun. So that is another kind of a move in the direction of that 400. And again, if the 400 is not giving me problems, I'll keep running the 400 and just playing with it until it does. And then at that point, I mean, what do? You got to start looking at it from a point of view of, do you throw or put a big block in it? The problem with putting a big block in it, though, is I don't know. I'm not going to say you're limited, but I've got a turbo 350 behind it. I would have to put a turbo 400 if I put a big block in it, because I ain't screwing around. I put a big block in this thing, and it's going to be at least a 498. I mean, I'm not going to be screwing around with, 454 or something like that. I'm going to really want something that's going to be rowdy if I go big block. So, 5.3 cam, long tubes, nitrous, which would get 100 shot at least. Be a lot of fun. So that's really more what I'm looking to do. Let's see. Machine with a mag. Is that what I'm reading that right? Say, do you think the 5.7s are a bit underpowered on the 1500s compared to the GM62s and Ford's 5.0s and the pickups? Not really. I like the 5.7. I think the 5.7 should be mandatory with a 392 gear. My work truck is a 5.7 tradesman with a 323 gear. And I love that truck. It never really feels underpowered. Now, I will say this, the 6.2 does have a little bit better tip-in torque, but it doesn't really outmotor the 5.7 from a practical standpoint. I mean, yeah, it might be a little bit faster, but I'm not sure that it is. It's not running away from it faster. The 5.0, on the other hand, the truck runs pretty good. And again, with that 10-speed automatic, you know, they run really good. So I would like to see the 5.7 updated at some point. I mean, it was the bad boy on the block when it first came out at 390 horsepower. You know, everybody else has been playing catch up with that thing. So, you know, it's a little bit long in the tooth, but it's a great power plant, and at least the modern ones are. The newer ones are. Not seeing as many camshaft failures and things like that. That's really where the 5.7 gets stung, by the way, is that potential reliability issue if you let them idle for too long, I think has been the overwhelming consensus of what causes those things to eat camshafts. Just allowed them to idle for too long, but that was before the lifter revamp, and supposedly they're a lot better now. We've got trucks in the fleet, by the way, with well over 200,000 miles with zero issues. But you got to remember that these trucks are constantly rolling. They don't sit there and idle for any real length of time. So take that for what it's worth. James Hutch checking in. What's up, man? What's up, brother? Saying good to see you. Any pointers you can provide me with swapping the 392 into my 05 Magnum RT? Been killing me trying to get proper PCM and wiring sorted. Saying hell. So you're going to need a donor car more than anything else. It's going to be kind of tough. The only other thing I could think of here is if you can get, I think Mopar has a standalone harness for engine swap cars for resto mods. I think they've got one for the 6.1 to run the 6.1 and the NAG one, and I think they've got one for the 6.4 that'll also run the HP 70. They might have one for the 6.4 that will also run a NAG 1. It's been a while. The thing with swaps, though, is I don't have a ton of experience with them into a newer version or an older version of that car. My main experience is with the swaps that were already done to cars, and I was just there for the tuning, data logging, and all that kind of good stuff. So I would say that there are let's just say there are sources better than me for that, especially when it comes to some of the newer stuff. Now, it depends on what all you are wanting to do with that 392. Like if you went with a 6.1 intake and kind of dumbed it down a little bit, in other words, get rid of the VVT, get rid of the variable intake runner, go with a 6.1 intake, and just lock out, just get a true lockout for the cam, then you may be able to just basically swap over in terms of displacement, or you would swap over in that respect, run the 6.4 intake with a window switch for the actuator for the short runner valve, and then just lock out the camshaft. That's another way you could probably get away with it, and that would be a little bit easier for you. So stick with the NAG 1 at that point too. But those would be the ways that I would go about doing it. I wouldn't try to get an 8-speed to work with that, because that might end up being more trouble than it's worth, especially when you consider you can build a NAG 1 that will I mean, dude, we were running Nag 1s and E55s that had 700-800 horsepower. So you've got some options, but it just depends on how deep you want to get with that swap, I guess is what I'm saying. A true swap would be very difficult and would require a complete harness swap. So there's that. If you wanted to go that route with the transmission, you'd also have to get the right drive shaft, because your output shaft is going to be different because you've got a HP transmission with a gay-trag rear end. I think DSS actually makes a drive shaft for that swap though. But you would have to do a full harness swap for that. Didn't say it was going to be easy, but if that's what you're looking for, that's what you're going to have to do along the way. So hopefully that helps. Probably stuff you already knew about, but if it confirms what you were already thinking, yep. So that, kind of lined out what I would do if it was my car. But if you really want to get crazy with it, you got to get a donor for it. Or get yourself to the pick apart and just start filleting it. Be real careful with that though. Make sure you don't snap any sensors or anything else like that you might need. By the way, my favorite resto mod is still the 62 D100 with the 6.1 and the Nag 1 with 373 gears. That truck was a freaking riot. Speed Freak 93's in, said, hey B, 2016 Challenger Hellcat seems to have a slight shimmy around 75 miles an hour. Read a lot about it being common with these. Is it usually wheels out of balance? It's usually wheels out of balance. Or it can be, if you feel it, if a true shimmy, in your steering wheel, check the wear pattern on your front tires. These cars come with a pretty significant amount of negative camber, and you can start to wear the inside of that tire. Check that and make sure that it's not feathering or that it's not excessively worn. That's one thing that I would also have you take a look at. So could be a tire out of balance, could be a bent rim, something like that, but you would know if it was something like a bent rim because you would have remembered hitting something hard enough to bend a rim, right? So check out the tire, make sure not excessive wear, check the alignment also on the car, front and rear. If it's got a lot of miles on it, take it in and have a 4-wheel alignment done to the car. Oh, by the way, for the question about what to do, I forget, sorry, but 4-wheel alignment. If you buy one of these things, on the used market, 4-wheel alignment, I would highly suggest. Let's see. R. Gibbs saying, appreciate your thoughts on the GT500. It will 99% be street driven. I'm coming from a Cobra and I love the fun factor. My favorite modern Mopar is a manual 392. They are just hilarious. Y'all know my story on this one. You might not have heard me say this one before, but one of my favorite cars at the shop, it's rare. Here's the thing. It's rare working at a shop where I'm bummed to see a car go. And a lot of times the cars that people think, oh, you must have been really sad to see that one go. It's like, no, that's like the one I wanted out of here the worst. But the 62 D100 TTS did that build. That's the gray one that you'll see pop up on Instagram every once in a while. That's the truck I'm talking about. I fell in love with that truck, and I almost eloped with that thing. I love that truck so much. The offer stands. That thing ever comes up for sale, it's in my garage. But one of the other cars that I fell in love with was this, for no reason, was this 2014 392 manual car. And I absolutely loved that car. It was a freaking riot. And it was just, the way that it would set up in corners, and you could feel the weight of it, and it was a little bit lumbering, but at the same time, it was sure-footed. You just felt everything in that car. So anyway, I really like that car. That's another one that for no good reason, that car always stood out in my head and was always such a neat and fun car. Cool guy owned that thing too. We ended up putting a Pro Charger on it. John Smith saying, I have an 07 Charger V6, looking into buying a Hemi 5.7 donor car and doing an engine swap, doing all the work myself. Gotcha. That's the way to do it right there. Let's see. Scat Pack is saying, have you heard of Hemi cams starving for oil on long idle periods? Just heard of this. Well, that's what I was saying earlier. Maybe it's kind of one of those things where I'll get to a question on accident. But it's not the cam. It's actually the lifter. And the problem was, the way I understand it, which in some scenarios makes absolutely no sense, because I've seen and heard of, had a SRT Cherokee. Cam failed at the shop, truck idling in the parking lot. Guy came in, was talking, everything was cool, goes back out, chirp, 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 chirp. Lifter failed. At the shop, sitting there idling. Anyway, some of this could be, let's be honest, maintenance, but not much of it. But some of it is. But it was the lifters that were having the problem. There was a potential metallurgy with the needle bearings, and there was a oil feed hole that wasn't there, and I think now is. Anyway, that was the primary issue. It wasn't the cam, it was the lifters. Let's see. Oh, Ken's checking in saying, hey B, I'm about 50 cars back in the lanes at Tucson Dragway, DA 5290 and 92 degrees, waiting for first round. Thank you for your help getting me here. Man, get out there and have some fun. 5290 is way up there. Holy mackerel. So for you guys that aren't familiar with what DA means and how that all plays into the grand scheme of things, at 5290, and he's running at 92 degrees, which means he's going to be probably getting into his hot spark table. He is down just over 15%. So that'll give you an idea as far as how much power he's lost. 5,000 feet, it's 3% per 1,000 foot. And so that is where he's at. He's down at least 15%, not including any timing that it pulls from his hot spark. Brother, you got a lot of time up there at that altitude, man. I'm telling you, that's tough, but it'll be fun. You're up there having fun. That's the main thing. James Hutch is checking in saying, at Scatback, I saw the YouTube video as well as the talk on the LX forums thread related to the topic. Someone recommended Johnson lifters, the 2356s for the Remedy. Would love to hear Mason speak on this. So for us, it was more about just running the Hellcat lifters. The Hellcat lifters didn't have that issue, and it was basically just killing the MDS altogether, and running a full set of Hellcat lifters. And that was pretty much the end of it. The Johnson lifters are good too. I haven't heard any bad things about them. It's just at the time we were swapping over to Hellcat lifters and calling it good. And again, nobody ever had any issues with the Hellcat lifters. I think they're just better all the way around, better metallurgy, just a bit of a more robust design. So the thing is that guys weren't breaking necessarily. They weren't breaking the MDS lifter. They're also breaking the non-MDS lifters that are in that series. So a little bit of and it was weird too, because I don't know the ratio. It might have been breaking, for every 4 lifters that failed, 3 of them might have been MDS, 1 of them might have been non, or, half and half, I'm not sure. But the problem that I had seen is that, you basically, when you did a cam swap, you were getting rid of those lifters anyway. So, we never had a problem with the higher lift, longer duration cams that the guys were beating the hell out of. And the cars that were babied always had jacked up lifters. So, go figure. But yeah, the Johnsons are good. Hellcat lifters are good too. I've run Hellcat lifters with all of my cams. It's what I suggest with all of my cams. And, they get beaten on mercilessly and work great. Our Gibbs is saying, for the truck, throw some stock 4.8 pistons and rings in that 5.3 for higher compression setup, and it wouldn't nuke the 4L60. Even GM did this for the Hypo 5.3. I like it. It's a good looking on that one, man. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Wouldn't have thought of that. Sounds like a fun engine too, by the way. I think it would rip, wouldn't it? But thank you for that. I appreciate it. Jay Blevin saying, finally took the 12 Charger RT to the track for the first time tonight. Had an absolute blast. Definitely held its own. Did a lot better than I thought. Now to install long tubes. Very cool. The the addiction begins. Ethan saying 5.7 seems to be dying and it's sad. Moose needs to step up and give its base V8 some love. I'll stick with my Coyote for now. Can't go wrong with a Coyote, man. Love them. 6.4 Hemi Power saying, I installed 315 3520s and the car feels like it's lost gear. Is this normal going with a tire this wide with 10.5-inch wheels, 2017 392 Charger? You can get away with it probably with the Charger too because you got a little bit more room back there. But as far as it feels like it's lost gear, no, probably not. I mean, 315 3520 is identical in height to a 275 4520. So I wouldn't say that you've lost anything there per se. I mean, make sure that it's not rubbing. That would be one thing I would look at because, you know, every car is a little bit different. But make sure it's not rubbing, and also make sure that, well, let's be honest. I mean, make sure that they're, you know, balanced, mounted properly. Don't run the spacers. Rubbing isn't a thing. All of that needs to be taken into account. But if you're on the up and up with all that stuff, you should be in good shape with those tires. A lot of guys run them. Ruben's checking in saying, appreciate the live feed, B Mac. I like it. Got the arm flex. Thumbs up. I like it. Jay Blevin saying, I know I will need a tune with my long tube install. Will I still need the rear O2 sensors? Yes, you will. Didn't know which sensors the speed density reads off of. Reads off of your primaries, which are your first ones. Here's the thing though. You're going to need the rears just because the computer needs to know that they exist. In the tune though, your tuner is going to set parameters to where the rears just don't really ever come into play, but they need to have a positive readiness statement for the computer though. So as long as you have that, 2 thumbs up, man, you're good to go, but you absolutely will still need them, no doubt about it. Ethan saying, besides stroking out a 5.7, what is the best rear wheel horsepower can a 5.7 make on a full 7 bolt-on E85 NA build? I have yet to see a built RT beat a 392 on the top end. Help me out here, Brian. Okay, so here's the thing. First of all, you got to look at a couple of things. Number one, it's going to be tough to beat the 392 because the 392 is already coming to the table with higher compression, more displacement. Heads, you know, 6 to 1, half a dozen to another. Both heads flow like crazy, so it's kind of hard to jump in the middle of that. But it's got a more aggressive cam, better exhaust, the whole bit. Now, in saying that, give Dr. Diff a shout. Ask him about the Joker cam, ported intake manifold, stick with the 80 millimeter throttle body, long tubes. You're going to be right there with that 392. It's going to be tough down low because you've got to make power somewhere, and there's always a bit of a trade-off. But the Joker cam with ported intake manifold, you can go with a ported throttle body if you want, but long tubes, all of that will give a 392 all it can handle and then some, especially from a roll. So, you know, add in a little bit of that stock to feel good. You know what I'm talking about? And you'll be in good shape. I just, E85 can, you got to have a lot of compression for E85 to really start to help you out. And what do I mean by a lot? Well, we're talking 13 to 1. You know, at least 12.5 to 1. I really wouldn't necessarily hang on E85. You can get away with it with the 392 because they're at 11 to 1, which is kind of that short limit as far as what I'm looking at as far as gains go with the 85, just because you can get away with more timing. the idea with the 85 is just be able to soak up as much timing as you possibly can. The problem is the Hemis, they don't work like that. They throwing more timing at it, even with the 85, if you don't have the compression there, you're just not going to make the power. So stick with 93, but you're going to have to go cam, long tubes, ported manifold, basically the whole shooting match. It'll get you close and it will sound amazing. Anyway, give Dr. Diff a shout. He can steer you in the right direction. 6.4's excellent. What's your issue with spacers? I run 1/8 so they don't rub. Is there a safety issue? Not necessarily a safety issue. It can be a safety issue. Okay, so if you're going to run spacers, be careful. Please get a quality spacer. Don't get one of these cast spacers. I mean, billet would be the best. The problem is I've seen them crack. And when that happens, obviously that's a bad thing. I mean, you wind up with things being loose that ought not be loose. So anyway, if you're running spacers, run a very high quality spacer, please. Aside from that, I don't really have a problem with them. Depending on the offset and the tire that you're running, you may need to run spacers. Again, if you go cheap, this is an area where it's not that your safety depends on it. Your life could depend on it. Just take it with a grain of salt. You know, the old fart behind the camera over here has seen some really fucked up shit, okay? And this is one of those areas. So quality products, go for it. You'll be in good shape. Just the other thing is I don't like going more than really 1/2 inch unless you've got a bolt-on spacer that's got its own studs. You know, if you start getting around that inch range, you're going to need to go that route, obviously, anyway. But the little ones, you'll be fine, especially an 1/8 inch. James saying, "Thank you for your technical experience. You rock." Thank you for hanging out. Appreciate it. Ethan saying, "What changes need to be made to the 392 to make it as potent to the aftermarket parts as the Coyote and the LS?" Oh man. Okay, so here's what needs to be done for the 392. One, you need a realistic intake manifold for that car, not the Holly high ram basically, and not the Edelbrock, which is a kind of a warmed over 6.1 manifold. Just not as pretty. We need something like the MSD intake. We need something like the FAST intake. Something that will allow the car to use the cylinder heads and to use a camshaft the way that the LS does. If you've got a set of cylinder heads on that Hemi that will, for lack of a better way of putting it, they outflow they'll outflow a good set of LS3 heads by about 10%. They're on par with a set of LS7 heads. And that's just the stuff that's sitting like right out there on your truck. I mean, those heads flow 330, 6.4 heads flow around 340. 330 and 340. Some low flow estimates are like 320. I mean, the heads flow crazy, but we just don't have an intake manifold to work with. I mean, the intake manifold is okay, but it's doing a great job of making low end and mid range power. It's dragging that power up that seems to be a problem, and it's evident as hell when you see the power curves on these things. You'll see this great run up through the mid range, and then horsepower will tabletop. Anytime you see horsepower tabletop, one of two things is happening. You're either running out of intake manifold flow, or, and if it's a true tabletop not associated with valve flow, or you're running out of cam lift, or at least cam duration, and that'll cause that issue as well if you've got good intake flow. Well, it's evident on every dyno chart that you see that these intake manifolds, as great as they are, and they're designed that way too for a reason, guys. Don't get this the wrong way. They're designed to get a vehicle that weighs as much as these cars do, to get them out of the hole and for acceleration. They're not there for top speed, they're there for acceleration, which these cars do great. But if you've ever taken one of these things out and really run them out, you'll find that, like the 392 cars at about 140 just kind of lay over a little bit. Send that one right back. Did I get that? Got him. Stuck between my fingers. You'll notice they just kind of lay over a little bit. It's just that intake manifold does not allow enough airflow. That change alone would completely change the complexion of Mopar in the aftermarket scene, because we've already got Stanky making tie bars and collars, helps to keep the valve train stable, camshafts are readily available, exhaust systems are readily available, all that stuff is readily available. We need an intake manifold that is focused between 3,000 and 7,000 RPM. Mix that into the gumbo and you got yourself a very solid performing car. Until we get that, we're kind of SOL. And unfortunately, it's going to remain that way because look at the LS, look at the support that it's got. Look at the Coyote with GT350 manifold on those things. All of that makes, all of that adds up. I mean, making those things flow in the RPM range where you need them to for drag racing is a big deal, and that's where we are kind of lacking. Now, that's not to say that you can't make really good power. Again, get a hold of Doc Diff, get a hold of Pike's Performance, get a hold of Duster Off, get a hold of anybody that's in your area that's doing this kind of stuff, and you'll find out pretty quickly that, yeah, you can make some really good power with these things, but it's never really the kind of power that you're looking for. And some of that has to do with the displacement of the engine. It's kind of a larger engine, and so it's not going to really spool up that much. I mean, they do spin to 6,200 though, which is a decent RPM, but see, you have to remember that at that RPM, you're really into the transition zone where you've done really good down low making power, getting the car moving. Now it's maintaining that acceleration rate at the back half of the track. And that's just where the Mopars don't do that well. That's why you always have to catch a Mopar. Mopars don't reel you in. You've got to reel in that Mopar. You just hope you got enough real estate to do it. And that's where I used to really do well with my 392. Raced a lot of cars that were faster than that car. And I still beat them because they just ran out of time. And I ate up all the real estate before they did. In some cases, if the race would have gone on for another 10 feet, though, I would have lost. That's the difference between track racing and street racing. Street racing, you go until somebody wins the race. You don't just run out of real estate. At least that's what most guys do. So you take that into account. You had a better intake, you'd be able to stretch the thing out and probably pick up about 30 horsepower in the transaction. Something to think about. Ethan saying, any chance you and I could do a duo stream talking about Hemi and Ford? I'd love to spitball knowledge with you. Yeah, hit me up. Give me a shout. Ethan saying, what makes the Boss 302 Cobra Jet and an 18 manifold flow so well? Long runners? No, actually, it's a different shape of runner, and they're actually a little bit shorter for their length, and that's why they do better. So the way intake manifolds work, in essence, is just like a set of long tubes work. You have length and you have diameter. Get your mind out of the gutters, guys. Anyway, length and diameter make up the power charge that you're going to make, or make up basically how that intake runner is going to be tuned. A long, let's say you're dealing with a runner that's 12 inches long. If it has a large diameter, it's going to favor the high end. If it has, say it's only a 3/4 of an inch around, using this as a wide berth here, but that would be a much higher velocity based on any given piston speed. So the idea is to optimize your intake charging between a certain RPM range. With the variable runner intake manifold, you kind of get somewhat the best of both worlds. The only problem is that the runners just simply aren't big enough. I mean, if you look at an MSD intake or you look at an FAST intake, look at the runners. They're huge. They're about that big around. They'll bell out too, and they're fairly large inside that manifold. Well, the Hemi doesn't really have that option. The runner itself is about that long, and it's only about this big around. And it bells out a little bit, but again, we're talking about, and then you go into the short runner mode, and it's just a little bit of a flap. It doesn't really, it's trying, and it does a great job, but what you have to remember is there are better ways of getting to the point. Also, to that point, you have to remember 5.0, smaller displacement. 6.2, smaller displacement. And so that given runner, runner for runner being equal, the runner on the 5 liter, that shape and size is going to benefit further down, or further, I should say, further up the RPM range than it will on a larger engine, because a larger engine is going to tax that airflow more quickly for any given piston speed, any given RPM, I should say. Piston speed, or at least airflow demand, will be greater. And that's why it's easier in terms of packaging to have the same basic runner size and length, in this case, just for point of conversation. On a 5 liter engine, that engine's going to favor higher RPM than the exact same intake would favor on the larger intake. It'll make more power down low, fade off on the big end. And where the 392 does a great job, again, is working as an engineered unit where you have a very heavy car that needs all that torque down low to get moving. Again, it's the acceleration through the 1/8 mile as opposed to the top end speed at the end of a 1/4 mile. Ethan's asking, would a Hemi benefit more from a higher revving intake manifold? Yeah, be careful with that. Be real careful with that, because take the Holly Hiram, for example. Yes, the engine will make more horsepower, but the trade-off is torque down low. That's okay if you're going to extend the RPM out to, say, 7,500 RPM, which is going to be tough to do because the Hemi has big valves, which are heavy, and now you've got to get a much stronger valve spring to control your valve train. And you're also going to need upgraded push rods because those dynamic forces are significantly greater. But even all that aside, the physics of getting something this heavy moving is going to be more daunting. So that means looser torque converter or more gear. Neither one of those propositions are very cheap, and so you have to really start getting into finite definitions here. Would it benefit from an intake that could at least help it to extend out to 7,000? Yes, but I wouldn't want to extend it much past 7,000 RPM. I'm looking for more power in that 5,500 RPM or that 5,000 RPM to 7,000 RPM range, and a cam that will carry it. And again, that's the tough part. So the Hemi's blessing is its curse. As an engineered package, it works fantastically. But take it past its engineered parameters and you wind up with a car which is a little bit doggy down low. And that's something that nobody likes when they're talking about killing that tip-in torque, which is like a staple of the 392. That's like its calling card, is that heavy tip-in torque. When you take that away, and you can throw 30 horsepower on the top end of this thing, it's maybe going to show up at the drag strip in terms of time, but even then, you may have wanted to go with a little bit more aggressive converter. Now, you know, I've got cams that work great with these things that you don't need a converter for, and, you know, you're going to see some gains, but, you know, early on in these Hemi's careers, there was a lot of cams that were out there that folks, to be honest with you, were garbage. So choose your cam wisely, choose your tuner wisely, they'll get you in a place where the car is doing a great job. But just understand that you're working within the confines of a car that weighs so much that without that intake manifold that you have now, which is kind of restrictive on the big end but great down low, without that intake manifold, the car is going to feel sluggish. And again, that's not what you want with one of these Mopars. Let's see. Argues saying, check out Alejandro Flores. I don't know the guy personally, but YOLO, yeah, I know him. Mustang guy with a channel like yours about tuning and knowledge. Actually, he knows a lot. He's a really well-educated and highly experienced guy in the field. So much respect to Mr. Alejandro. Ethan saying, I'm familiar with Alex and keep up heavily with him. I just want to know what could make Mopar better in the aftermarket. So if by better you mean more supported, good question. Here's the thing though. Just like what I was just saying with all of the challenges with making an intake manifold that's going to work well. You know, my biggest beef has been that Mopar doesn't support the 392. The aftermarket kind of supports the 392 with camshafts and exhaust, but nothing in terms of intake manifold, which is a real shame, like a major shame here. I think it's because of the weight of the car. They do such a good job, they being Mopar, do such a good job of putting together a package that works exceptionally well in 99.99% of owners' hands. They love the tip-in throttle response. They love the instant torque. These things are a lot of fun to drive. It's in that 0.001% of owners out there that are taking their car to the tracks religiously, modifying it, doing basically everything that Mopar condemns you to do because they'll void your warranty, but need you out there doing to support the brand. Pricks. Anyway, personal opinion. The fact of the matter is, to get the cars really where they need to be, revving it to 6,200 isn't really going to be the plan. You got to remember that the LS stuff, I mean, they're running this stuff out to 7,500 RPM. Shit, my LS6 I ran to 7,300. So, and that was with the stock intake, just with a little bit of work done to it. So that's the RPM range that you need to be. But to get there, you need the springs, you need the cam, you need the exhaust, you need the lifters, you need the push rods, you need the stand keys, you need all of that to make it all work properly. And how many guys are doing that? I mean, look at the cost of a cam swap. Let's be real, guys. It's obnoxious. It really is. But it's a labor-intensive thing. There are guys that can do it pretty quickly, but the reality is that to do it quickly and correctly are two different things. And again, it's an expensive proposition with everything that you're going to swap out. Plus, you're pulling the heads off the car. It's annoying if nothing else. So keep that in the back of your mind when you're looking at what the aftermarket is or isn't doing. It's that extra step that guys aren't willing to take because that dollar bill thing kind of jumps up and bites in the ass. Because of that, guys aren't really modifying them that often. And not to mention, early on, they got stung with cams that made the cars feel like a dog, and again, didn't really offer any upshot on the backside. Look, I've driven these things. Guys, you got to remember, I was the guy doing all the data logging to begin with, the initial data logs. That was me. I was the first one to drive it, and a lot of times the last time to drive it being the car, which whatever it is. And it didn't matter if it made 300 horsepower or 1,300. I was behind the wheel of it. So I guess where I'm coming with this is don't worry and don't get so hung up necessarily on the aftermarket not working with Mopar as much as Mopar isn't really supporting their product or their brand the way that Ford or Chevrolet does. It's kind of difficult for the aftermarket to get on board when Mopar themselves aren't really given that engine any love. But the big area that I could see an improvement would be if FAST or MSD made an intake for the 392. It would take a lot of R&D to make it right. You would have to probably come up with about 17 or 18 different configurations for the runners themselves. You know, to really work properly and to not run into valve float issues, or at least valve train control issues with the stock cam, which there's now problems with that to consider when you get into this. There's so much. But anyway, if you go with a cam, that intake's coming off and you're only going to swap out the intakes, again, you have to realize you're making trade-offs here. So anyway, yeah, so you're asking, so the key to the 392 in the aftermarket is the intake manifold? In my opinion, yeah, because that's the only thing that we have left. And you got to remember that the 392 comes to us from a strange place. I mean, it's a stroked small block is all it is. But the reality is that the 392 has so many hot rod parts already working for it, and it's trying its level best, again, to get something that weighs it as much as these things weigh moving. But yeah, to make the power, you're going to have a different intake manifold. And that's just the way that it is. Ethan's saying, the 392 just fascinates me. It's killer in regards to staying stock, but it gets railed on by any FBO coyote. Well, sorta. I mean, you go cam, my intake, tune, long tubes, and E85, and, well, Rob Panton's 4,800 pound brick just put 2 car links on a freaking 350R this morning from a roll race from 80 miles per hour. So when we're talking about that, King of the Hill Grand Poobah Mustang, you can get there from here, but damn what you got to do to get there. You know what I mean? So here's what I would suggest. Take the 392 at face value. Cam, headers, ported throttle body, high flow cats or no cats, doesn't really matter. Just make sure that the cat itself will flow what you're looking for it to flow. All of that into account, you'll have a car that is extremely fun to drive, that does everything realistically really well, and is a very fun package. Now, if you want something that is faster and you really want it to rev out, just know that the Holley intake is out there, but you're going to have to put that engine in something with a lot less weight, with a different converter, possibly a gear, significantly more aggressive cam that you would probably want to run on the street, but you can get away with everything, right? And you're going to want to spin it to about 7,500 RPM. Do that, and you've got yourself an engine that's going to be making around 600, 630 horsepower at the flywheel. But again, it's going to come at the cost of drivability and the fact that you're going to now lose torque down here to pick up power up there. That's just the way that it works. I mean, ask any LS guy, me included. I mean, I'm kind of in that camp as well. Great engine, awesome, does a lot of cool things. But most guys will tell you they went too big with the cam and they ruined their car. So just know that coming into it. You can make a ton of power, and you can make so much power that you ruin the drivability and the personality of the car. Been there and done that. Alex is saying, hey, B Mason, unrelated to Mopar, but have you ever considered learning to fly? Yes, I have. As a matter of fact, I was learning to fly helicopters at one point. It's the next step up from cars in terms of thrills. I'm hooked myself. Yeah, I was doing helo. Didn't quite make it to my solo, but yeah, toss me the keys and I can just about, well, it's been a while. I'd have to do some refresh stuff, but yeah, R22, baby. Same thing all of us learned to fly in Hilo. And if you can fly an R22, you can literally fly anything, because that thing is the most jittery, skittish. I mean, it's a go-kart basically for the skies. But yeah, as a matter of fact, I was learning how to do that because at one point I was going to be a bush pilot and was going to fly also for hog eradication. So yes, I am right there with you on that one, Alex. He's also asking, how much am I looking at in labor costs on average for a cam install and tuning? Well, let me tell you what to budget. Hopefully you're sitting down watching this. I'm going to tell you to budget $5,000. That's going to cover you for the cam, the labor, the tune, the install. You may have to add unlocking of your ECU into that, but depending on what shop you go to, labor rates, things like that. But you're also going to want to factor in more of that dollars for exhaust system to work well with it. You're also going to want to look at, which cam are you going with? Some shops use Texas Speed, others use Comp. There's going to be some cost variance there. But give Dr. Diff a shout. He can get you squared away, if you're in Texas anyway, and steer you in the right direction. But just know that coming into this, it's not a cheap proposition. And please, please, please stick with a shop that speaks Mopar. I can't possibly stress how important that is. If it costs you an extra $600 for you to ship your car to a shop, costs you an extra $700 to ship your car to a shop. I don't know what shipping a car costs, but I can tell you it's worth it. Ship it to somebody that knows what they're doing, because if you try to stay local and do this stuff on the cheap, you will come away with this far worse for the experience. So know that coming into it, and please go that route. I've seen this happen before, and listen, I mean, even with the best intentions, I mean, the road to hell you'll find, right? But at least if you're going with somebody that speaks fluent Mopar, the chances of you having a great experiences are very high. Go the other route, and I've seen some shit. I don't even want to talk about what shops, what they did or anything like that, because it's true. Anybody that works at a shop will tell you the same type of stories. But damn, yeah, please go that route. Do your homework on that deal. Alan's saying best supercharger for 5.7, E-Force all the way. Ethan Ack saying FBO E85 Coyotes with stage 3 cams are putting down 510 rear wheel horsepower. Just seems like a better investment over the Mopar. It will, there's no question about that. I mean, if you're going for absolute power, it is. But you've got to remember that, well, for one, we're talking about a dyno jet, and putting down 500-ish horsepower with a 392 is not that hard on a dyno jet. A lot of cars do, as a matter of fact. But it's the torque where the 392 really, really shines. And so there's at least that to consider. The driving experience is going to be significantly different between the two as well. So, again, not for nothing, but, you can easily find yourself, no matter which way you go, spending a lot of money to get to that 500 horsepower to the rear wheels number, which, let's face it, a lot of guys want that number. It's a big number, right? I've seen cam 392s on pretty, let's be honest, forgiving dyno jets, go like 507, 508, 510. So, with, 480, 490 torque. Just kind of depends on the setup though. So in terms of, how much power can you make, it's going to be easier. It's going to be more commonplace to make big power numbers with a 5.0. But again, just remember that what is the trade-off? What is the driving experience? What is the fun factor that you're going for that you get with a Mopar that maybe you do or maybe you don't get with the Mustang? just something to consider when you're putting one of these builds together. Let's see, Alex is saying, that's awesome. I'm in the Air Force. CSO school, flying T6 Texans. Hey, I like it. Very cool. Congratulations on the T6 Texan 2 ride. I've actually flown the original Texan, the original World War II train. Was it AT? Oh, damn it. Shit, I just brain farted. Anyway, was able to learn aerobatics with that thing. So, never did nail a Cuban 8, but all the normal stuff I was able to pull off. So, but very cool, by the way. That's awesome. Thank you very much for sharing that, man. That's cool as shit. Love flight, by the way. Oh, so you know, by the way, Alex, I was a docent at the Hiller Aviation Museum, engine specialist. So what I did is I would explain engine theory, engine technology, from the Wright engines all the way through, like the Wasp 2800s, things like that. Mainly piston-driven engines. So that's my experience on the aviation side. Hiller is a civilian, civil museum, but they've got some military background in there. And of course, I would discuss some of the cooler aspects of the whole aviation side, which was the hot rodding aspect with some of those engines, by the way. Did I get him? Did I get him? Son of a, damn it. Anyway, mosquitoes. That's awesome, man. I love that stuff. I love flight. It was my first love as a kid. Ethan saying, I just pray to God that Dodge makes the Challenger lose weight, or they'll introduce a lightweight Cuda to keep the 392 in it. There's a lot of folks that were thinking that route too. You know, the weight, what can Dodge do? And really, it's just lightening up the LX platform, LA, LC platforms, because they're not changing it. And let's face it. I mean, they will keep re-upping the license agreement with Mercedes-Benz for this platform until they stop making money hand over fist with it. So I think once we get out of this COVID thing, you get into August, September, October, you start seeing that really decline, things really start getting back to normal. I think you're going to notice that, there might be some talk about what's coming in 2023 when the latest licensing agreement is up. But my hope is that there's a lighter weight version of this platform, keep the 392 alive, maybe introduce an aluminum block. I mean, get with the times a little bit here. That would do more than anything else. I mean, take out 100 pounds here, right, guys? Maybe an intake manifold revision, things like that. Bump the power up instead of 485, bump it up to, 510, 520. Give the 392 maybe a new lease on life, and then we can talk about whatever other weight savings can go from there. Machine is asking, what size rear tire do you have on your Hellcat? On my street setup on the 10.5s, I have 305 35 20s, and on my drag pack setup, I have 305 45 17s on the back of it. Ethan saying, last question, I'm doing a cat delete on my 5.0. Will I lose power with the O2 sensor CEL, or will that just an O2 sensor issue that's an annoyance? I'm running E85, so an open header would ruin my O2s. So, no, you're not going to run into an issue there, although you're going to want to set that O2 sensor sensitivity to a point where it's in a readiness position, but not necessarily in play. And so, not that familiar with Ford tuning, but I'm pretty sure it'll be fairly similar to the Mopars, where you'll set it as O2 sensor comes online at 312 degree engine coolant temperature, or something along those lines. That's what I would look at in terms of how to get by without that rear O2, but I would still have that in a ready position, or just turn them off in the tune and call it good. But I wouldn't run it. I would never want to have an open CEL, because if something does go haywire and you've got an open CEL, you're never gonna look for it, and you don't want to have check engine light. The only time you want to check engine light is if you need to check the engine. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that. Kill it in the tune, or run an MIL on it, or do something along those lines, but try not to have that light on, because if it's on, you want it to be on for a reason that you don't know about, not something that you just dismiss. Actually had a problem with that once. Alex is saying it's super cool. Love to pick your brain on that if we ever run into each other. I'll tell you what, a little bit of homework for you. It's a lot of fun. Look up the Hall Scott engines. People talk about Hemis making all this power. The funny thing is, Hemi was just a volumetrically efficient way to get a lot of air into a cylinder that didn't have any compression ratio. Hemis are great at that. And when you're not running big RPM and you're running fairly decent draw rates, you need volumetric efficiency. And so the Hall Scott engines were pretty cool in that they were large displacement, true Hemis with an actual cylinder. You didn't have a cylinder head, you had a cylinder that bolted to a crankcase, a true crankcase, why it's called a crankcase. People don't realize that back then, a crankcase was literally just the box that the crank was in with the bearings. The cylinder heads bolted to it like a Harley Davidson engine or a Volkswagen engine or a lawnmower engine, same idea. So they had gear-driven overhead cams. Now keep in mind, these engines didn't spin past 1,000 RPM. And they would make like 100 horsepower, but it was like, 400 pound-feet of torque or something silly like that. Anyway, lots of cool stuff from back in the day. They did a lot of goofy stuff. The Wright engines were kind of neat. But as you started to see that metallurgy evolve and fuel start to evolve, where they could run higher compression ratios, that's when things got real interesting. And so anyway, but the Hall Scott was always one that jumped off the page for me, because we had a big Hall Scott engine cutaway at Hiller, and we had it was a 5-inch bore, 7-inch stroke, 6-cylinder. Anyway, we had a full Hall Scott, and then we had the cutaway, and it was always fun to check out. So anyway, big naturally aspirated, true. I mean, when I say true Hemi, I mean the top of the cylinder looks like this. I mean, it's literally half a sphere up there, not just a part of a semicircle. So neat old engines, neat, really cool stuff. Let's see. Wyatt's saying, just came back from watching your video on your Ram 1500, looking to buy one. How good are they on gas mileage? Well, it depends on how much you have your foot in it, right? Everybody always says that. Here's the thing. I nailed down anywhere between 18.5 and 20 miles per gallon in my fleet truck. No matter how I drive it, I get 18 to 18.5 miles per gallon. And on long trips, it'll knock down 20 to 21 easily. And if I baby it, 22. And that's kind of how it goes. On one of those videos, I think it was the catch cam video, you'll see the fuel economy listed on there. And I think on that one, it was like 18.5. And again, that's no matter how I drove that truck, because I had quite a bit of highway miles that I was driving every day with that truck, and the one that I have now for that matter, it would always fall into that 18.5 mile per gallon range. So hopefully that helps. Crazy SRTH checking in saying, howdy B, what's up, man? Smitty's saying, intake manifold revision makes a lot of sense. Seems like the Rams make much more power on the dynos versus the Car 5.7 due to the active manifolds. For example, this upcoming winter drag season, saying you should have multiple 6.4 truck manifold Rams go 11s with bolt-ons. And recent subscriber due to Racer X mentioned you having a ton of knowledge. Oh, thank you very much. So yeah, well, look at so Most Performance. Matt puts a lot of the 6.4 truck manifolds on his trucks. They do really, really well. It's an awesome intake manifold. And in a lot of ways, I mean, I got to admit, the 5.7 is superior to the 6.4 in that it utilizes airflow better. the 6.4 is a little bit choked off because of the manifold, and I've been complaining about this really ever since I started porting them. I mean, it was one of these things where I'm going, oh man, there's so much more you could have done. And really, when you look at the port size and you look at the manifold, you look at the port volume, the port runner length, and all this, you look at it and you go, it's neutered. You know, if the manifold were just scaled up a wee bit, it would be better. But, you know, if my aunt had a package, she'd be my uncle. So, I mean, you got to work with what you got. But you're right. I mean, the 5.7, you can kind of get away with more with the 5.7, especially when you consider the fact that, I mean, damn, all you really have to do is cam, small cam for that matter, intake swap, long tubes, converter. Next thing you know, you're in the 11s with a truck. Now, granted, I get it. There's a lot of weight reduction going on here, like an obnoxious amount of weight reduction in some cases. But they're there. And look at Dr. Diff. I mean, he's basically running 10s with a crew cab right now with a turbo setup. So, you know, when you take all of this into account, there's some really fast cars. There are really fast trucks that are faster than the cars. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that a lot of people just aren't doing anything with the cars, which is a shame because, I mean, there's some potential in that 5.7 that just folks don't want to jump in the middle of. And again, my opinion is, yes, the intake manifold is a big point of contention for me, only because I've got so much hands-on experience with that intake manifold. It does a lot of really good things. And again, from an engineered, packaged platform standpoint, 2 thumbs up. Obviously, I think the car needs more cam. That's why when I was working with Pites, I was there to help put that camshaft program together. And it was a lot of work trying to put a camshaft together for a car that weighs as much as one of these do. The fact you got to try to get it out of the hole, still make power on the big end, and have something that you just don't lose power with down low as much. When you've got a set of tumble port heads that want to flow a ton but can't because the only place it's getting velocity from is the intake runner length. See where I'm going with this? It's like everything is out of tune just enough to be in tune. You know, it's, you know, like a broke clock is right twice a day. That's almost the feeling that you get with the 392. It's like everything there is so unimaginably good. And I've even gone so far as to say that, in my opinion, it's the best engine that Dodge has ever made. It'd be great if they put it in more things. I don't know, like a truck, for example. But I digress. The thing is that the 5.7 does such a great job with airflow, and I really do think that if you find yourself with one of those and you want to make a lot of power, when you start throwing money at it, the result that you get for your investment is a lot bigger. So anyway, I digress. Let's see. Oh, and yeah, Racer X, good buddy of mine too, by the way. Thank you very much for supporting both of us, actually. Ethan saying, take it easy, B. Thanks for answering. Absolutely, man. Thanks for hanging out. X is checking in saying, so apparently the Camaro is dead after 2023. That's what I heard too. Looks like it's going to be Dodge versus Ford. Any chance that Dodge makes a dual overhead cam Hemi to keep up with the times, if that's even possible? So here's the thing. No, that won't be a possibility, I don't think. If you see anything like that, it's going to be... Well, first of all, let's dig into this. Technically, any dual overhead cam is a Hemi just by design. And that's why I've said in the past, in a lot of ways, the Coyote is more Hemi than the Hemi is. But that's just semantics, and quite honestly, it's just a description of a flow-through head at that point. So here's the thing. What they're going to have to do, they're going to have to make the Hemi perform better one way or another, either through lighter weight through the platform or with more power. Ford is not going to take their foot off the gas. And let me tell you something. Ford was making the GT500 when they didn't have to make a GT500. They were making the Terminator Cobra when they didn't have to make the Terminator Cobra. And let's absolutely not forget the fact that the bad boy that started this whole fist fight was the Lightning, a truck with a supercharger that started this whole modern era of big horsepower supercharged platforms back in 1999. They didn't have to do that. Ford will always make that hot rod, and it will be up to Dodge to play catch up. And look, Hemis are fun. Hemis are great. They make a great sound. They're enjoyable to drive. They smoke the tires at will, and that's really all you need to make great commercials. But where the rubber meets the road in the real world, and when marketing doesn't matter, and where results are the only currency that are being traded, that's where Mopar is going to have to do significantly better than Ford, a company with a track record of getting bored and making hot rods seemingly out of thin air. Mopar is going to have to do better, and they need to start doing better now, not later. Now. They can't wait until 2023 when it's a 2-horse race. They need to have something in the pipeline, and they need to start getting people excited about it now. Not wait until a year out. They need to start putting some feelers out, giving us some type of an idea of what to look forward in the next year, 2 years, whatever. We need to see something, because without that level of optimism, we already know what Ford's going to do. We already know what Mopar has done. And to be honest with you, they've kind of dropped the ball on a couple of areas, especially with the 1320. They need to be able to pick up this fumble and start running to the house with it. Because if not, I mean, it's going to be the front of the hand, then the back of the hand from Ford all over the place. And that is exactly what will happen if Dodge, FCA, whatever alphabet soup they turn themselves into, doesn't get with the program quickly. Listen, just because you win the fight doesn't mean you can take the rest of your life off if you're still in the game. If Mopar's still in the game, they can't be sitting on the couch eating Fritos and bean dip. They need to have their ass working in the gym to get themselves ahead of the game, or at least in a position to where they'll be competitive. Because if it weren't for the Camaro, let me rephrase this, if it weren't for the Camaro being hemmed up by bean counters, Mopar would be sucking freaking hind tit right now. Don't forget that. I get it. Mopar did great. 2008, 2015 redesign. Little Miss Revlon, Hellcat shows up, starts whacking everybody upside the head. Next thing you know, the fight is on. Hellcat is still the yardstick that everybody measures their car against, even the red eye for that matter. It needs to stay that way, and they need to do something with the naturally aspirated combinations, especially the 392 guys, the guys that have been flying this flag the highest, before they start jumping ship. Make no mistake, fellas, most Mopar guys are ex-Ford guys. Very few Chevrolet guys made the switch. A lot of us were Mopar guys that went Ford back in the day because Mopar walked out on us, or at least didn't give us much to work with. Well, we're in the heyday of that Mopar resurgence right now. But if 2023 rolls around, Camaro and their flaky ass hollers peace out, heads to the freaking, great hoedown in the sky, and it's just left with Mopar versus Ford, it's not going to be pretty. Especially if Mopar has nothing to show, which has been their MO leading into this. So you got a lot of guys looking at Ford going, hey, we got this Mach 1 coming. Yeah, I get the TRX is on the way, but that's a truck. We got to have something better. And we've got to have a way to show our brand loyalty and our brand pride when we take these things to the drag strip. don't market these things to us with a bunch of rock and roll and tire smoke if you're just going to turn around and void the warranty if we put a different tire on the back of it. It's a pretty good way to find that Mopar in the used car lot of a Ford dealership. And as I've said before, the best place to find a good deal on a used Dodge is in a freaking Ford's used car lot. Anyway, enough of that rant. Mach is asking, by chance, do you know of any reputable tuners for imports in Houston? Oh, if you wouldn't have asked me, I could have told you. God dang it. Over off of 59. As soon as I kill the live stream, I'll remember it. Anyway, God dang it. Depends on the import, but sorry, man, I'm blanking on that one. Damn, we've been on for almost 3 hours. Dang it. Let's see. Oh, Alex is saying they tried a dual overhead cam Hemi in the 60s, but if they do that, it'll have to be much smaller displacement, much harder for it to do an MDS setup on a DOHC engine, which you need for EPA requirements. Actually, a lot of folks got into the 4-valve business back then. So it was the D904 or whatever it was Dodge, but Buick had one. There were a lot of folks getting into that 4-valve overhead cam thing. It just fizzled out, especially when, folks started figuring out that, the EPA era was coming and big horsepower was on its way out. But yeah, I mean, you had the Ford single overhead cam engines. It's still a 2-valve, but the SOHC 427 was a thing. I mean, that was a production engine, so they were out there for sure. And it's nothing new. I mean, overhead cam has been out literally since the engine was invented. In fact, cam and block is kind of weird. Cam and block was relegated to flatheads, really. I mean, for a long time, or for at least a significant amount of time, a lot of the overhead valve engines were all overhead cam engines. It was just easier to have followers with a gear drive to a cam on head as opposed to cam in block. And the evolution of that cam in block with overhead valves was just a kind of a, well, for lack of a better way of putting it, an evolution. Anyway, X is saying those freaking coyotes are fast, or coyotes are so freaking fast. Yeah, they are. Smitty's saying absolutely. Do you remember an article on Road and Track? They showed off a high revving V8 and a big block New Edge, I believe, before they released it. Terminators. Yep. X is saying, I want a dual overhead cam V8 Mopar. They can compete with these stupid numbers that the 5.0s and the 5-liter Coyotes are putting out. Yeah, for sure. And that's the thing. I mean, dual overhead cam is definitely the way to go in terms of actually making power, but packaging comes into play. To make a dual overhead cam engine, that cylinder head goes from being this tall to that tall and about that wide to accommodate all the stuff that's going on up there. Well, you got to fit that in one of these engine compartments. And the weird thing is about these LX platforms, the engine compartment's kind of small. It's cramped, if nothing else. So that'll be another thing with the actual. If they revise the platform, it has to be able to account for, if they're going to have a dual overhead cam, anything V8 wise, it's got to account for something that big. And if you've never seen a Coyote, by the way, if you've never seen a Coyote just the size difference against like an LS, you would swear the Coyote is a big block. It's huge by comparison. Alex is saying that he'd love to see an aluminum 426 with a new intake manifold on a lightened platform, maybe mildly hybridized. That should help EPA requirements. It'd be easy to do. The problem is, to get it through all the testing is tough. And it's really tough when the power difference, I mean, look, you got to come up with 10% realistically to justify a platform change. In this case, that's 50 horsepower. That's kind of tough to come by, but it's not impossible. but you can do it with displacement. The problem is how does that engine now fit into CAFE regulations? Another pain in the ass. It's basically like a murderer's row of headaches and train wrecks and pain in the asses that you're going to have leading into getting something like that through testing, and not to mention the cost of it. You got to make up for that money somewhere, right? And that's the problem that they run into with these newer platforms. Not to mention you can just make it happen with a 392. The tooling's already there. Just have a good quality aluminum and be in good shape. Yeah, X is saying it's not even fair how well those Coyotes do under boost. Mopar has not touched the 392 since 2015. And before that, 2011, they don't care about the NA platform. Drop the weight and get a better manifold. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I've been saying that for a while. Alex is saying the Coyote has just flow more air than the Hemi. That's because 4 valves versus 2 valves has helped make up for the smaller displacement. In terms of actual airflow, the modern Hemi head flows more than the Coyote, but just a scotch. And you got to remember that flow is tied to a significantly larger engine, but both heads flow like you would not believe. That's what folks forget. The 5-liter, even though it's a 5-liter, has the head flow capacity of something that is at least, well, it's like 22% larger in the 6.4. It's close. Certainly with the 6.4 or 6.2. So you've got a smaller engine that is just not encumbered by the pumping losses the way that the larger engines are. Even though the 6.4's heads flow unbelievably well, the intake manifold becomes the restriction. So now we're back to that, and I can put a lot of work into a manifold to get it flowing really well, but it's still not 100% there when it comes to the actual charging dynamic that the 5-liter is going to have. There's a lot that goes into that. And then David saying, what kind of power increase can I expect with a 6.4 intake manifold and factory SRT headers? 2018 300S 5.7 91 octane tune cap back. Yeah, you'll pick up about 10 with the SRT headers, maybe even 12. But I wouldn't really look for too much more than that. Oh, and the manifold. Down low, you'll pick up about 7 foot-pounds of torque, and up top, you'll pick up about 10-ish horsepower, if memory serves me correctly. And guys, with that, I'm going to check out. We've been into this now for almost 3 hours. My voice is jacked up. I sound like I've been gargling freaking rocks. Anyway, thanks for hanging out with me tonight, guys. I hope y'all have a fantastic rest of the week. Let's see, X is going to send us out. Both the LS and Hemi are overhead valve motors. Why doesn't the Hemi have the aftermarket that the LS does? Kind of what we were talking about before, man. Heavy car needs the long runner to get moving, and without that, the car feels like a turd down low, which takes away all of its personality. Aftermarket's having a hard time making that difference up. So, and then Alex asks is, how can we make a manifold that makes bigger peak numbers but maintains low and mid-range torque? It's the shape of the actual runner itself. It's going to be more bell-mouthed, about the same length, but it needs to just be a bit more bell-mouthed. It can have the same amount of curve, and then the runner would be inside a full common plenum is how I would design it. But guys, y'all have a great one. God bless. Appreciate all of y'all hanging out with me. Have a fantastic week, and stay safe out there. We're not done with COVID, so, do your social distancing, all that kind of good stuff. Y'all know the drill. Have a great one. That's a wrap. Adios.